Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, whether you in the world, it is your Lore Saviour, with a particularly huge box with a shitload of tape around it. So, what the fuck are we doing here? Well, if you've been paying attention to my amazing uploads, you will know that I've been slowly teasing some zombie-related TTRPG content on the Lore by Night channel. The first of it, which was looking at how we could put zombies in the world of darkness, and a video for that is going to pop up there somewhere right now. And I have, throughout the course of this year and a little bit of last year, I've been slowly approaching my kinemortophobia, which is the phobia of zombies and becoming of one, which may sound a bit of a ridiculous thing to you, but when I tell you that when I was 3 years old, my late father forced me to play Resident Evil 3, that would kind of make a lot of sense. And as much as I love horror, zombies has always been something that I've avoided like the plague, honestly. And pun not intended there. And I'm wanting to change that, and I'm quite fed up of my fucking father having this hold on me in that regard, and it's something that I've been wanting to change. And I feel I've been getting better. I've been watching a handful of zombie films, some of which I've been reviewing in the YouTube community posts. I have been, as of the recording this, the 30th July 2025, in the year of our Lord Telos, I've been playing the Telltale Walking Dead games, which I'm probably going to do a big old review for soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And soon I'll be playing a load of zombie TTRPGs using a variety of different solo rules, and I'm also going to be running The Walking Dead for some folks too, so keep your eyes peeled for that as well. But regarding this very video, for this appreciation of The Walking Dead, both the Telltale games and the TTRPG, which is based upon the TV show, which is also based upon the comics, and in this box here is, hopefully, the 4 compendiums for the Walking Dead comic book series, which it's like over 4,000 pages, 193 comics, 35 volumes, 16-year run print time, and it's going to accumulate in this one big fucking huge video. I think I've got all the statistics. I might have missed one or here there, but it doesn't really matter. So this video is really going to be a video of 2 parts, or 5 parts technically. The first part is going to be the unwrapping and checking out the quality of these huge compendiums, and then we're going to be reviewing each compendium side by side in a similar style that I did when I was reapproaching the Mage the Ascension TTRPG, for which a playlist or whatever is going to appear up there somewhere. I don't know how I'm going to work that out. I might leave it in the description below, but regardless, check out my YouTube channel and see how I found Mage the Ascension. So, and enough of that waffling. I think we now should get onto the fun part of this particular video, or this segment rather, and use my very official Lore by Night book opening knife. Well, it's a butcher's knife, but if it was zombies it seemed appropriate in it. So let's see how we're going to do this. This is clearly a big old repurposed Amazon box that the seller on eBay has repurposed as, well, this box. Because usually I would tear into this, but there is so much tape on it, as you have probably seen already. I'm not too sure where to begin, although that being said, there's a little cheeky little flap there, so we're just gonna peel back that and see what happens. If anything, you get some nice box opening ASMR. Okay, that's not going to go any further, so can we cut a little bit there? There we go. Lovely stuff. What does that say? Handle with care. Well, one of the corners is a bit fucked already, so we'll see how much care has been taken in the delivery, and also how much care has been taken in the handling of these books. They looked alright on the seller's page. I just hope that I haven't been deceived. Table's going fucking moving about. That's how chunky these books are. There's about 1,000 pages per volume, hence the accumulation of the 4,000 pages earlier. Okay, we've got 1 layer of fucking tape off. Huzzah. Now for 1 billion more, probably. And if you just want to get to the reviews or me actually holding the books, you can use the various chapters in like the little timeline thing, or clicking in the bits in the description below. because I know that this is going to take a fucking long ass time, and Holly is already bored of this section of the video, so hey ho. It'd be nice if I could just like unwrap it like taking off a skirt or something. Okay, we're making progress. You can see part of the box is beginning to unwrap itself. Okay. Progress is being made. Alright, so we can peel back that level now. No, we can't, because that bit is still not wanting to give. There we go. I'm not wanting to fight too much more with the tape, so hopefully we can just peel back that. Okay, that's working well. That bit's just fallen off. Peel back that. Peel back that. Bit of card there. Shopping bag is here. Not that you can fucking see any of it at the moment. From Lidl or Lidl, depending on which part of the world you're from. And the books themselves are sellotaped individually, I think. Yes, they've got bubble wrap around them. Which just shows there's some care that's been put behind them. Each one of these is particularly heavy. As I said, 1,000 pages each. Can't really see which order I fucking pulled them out from, but I'm guessing from what I recall. I think the packer put 4, 3, 2, and then 1 was right at the bottom. God blimey, these are huge. Like, I could see that they were huge on the seller's page, but it's one thing, like, seeing a picture of it and then actually seeing them in the flesh, so to speak. Okay, so let's carefully unwrap these and see how we get on with that. Now, from memory, the first volume showed the most signs of wear, as in not like a negative thing here, just because it's the one that's been used the most. They all looked in great condition, and it looks like I wasn't deceived too much. There we go. That is indeed Compendium 1. I'll show them individually as I open them. As I pick that up to show you around, like the corner there's a little bent, which is fine. Not too fussed about that. Yeah, it's kind of where I fall, like right at the bottom there. Just where it's been opened and used a lot. Oh god, this is heavy. Damn, Daniel. Just love in the little corner at the back. On the back, on the corner there, it just says a little teeny tiny horror. God, I have no idea how I'm going to fucking read these. Honestly, like, I'm going to have to have them down on a fucking desk or something. Okay, let's read the blurb as per my usual unwrapping shit. How many hours are in a day when you don't spend half of them watching television? When is the last time any of us really worked to get something that we wanted? How long has it been since any of us really needed something that we wanted? The world we knew is gone. The world of commerce and frivolous necessity has been replaced by a world of survival and responsibility. An epidemic of apocalyptic proportions have swept the globe, causing the dead to rise and feed on the living. In a matter of months, society has crumbled. No government, no grocery stores, no mail delivery, no cable TV. In a world ruled by the dead, we are forced to finally start living. Collect issues 1 through 48 of the acclaimed zombie hit! I don't know a great deal about The Walking Dead. Most of my experience comes from the little bit that's mentioned in the official Walking Dead TTRPG by Free League Publishing. And rest has been picked up through Telltale's The Walking Dead. I know that everyone is infected, that it's not the bite per se that always turns you, that kills you, but there's like something in the brain that like clicks when you're dead sort of thing. Just being bitten or scratched by the walkers speeds all that shit up. Was a really interesting twist about it, so it's not the zombies per se that are the Walking Dead. Well, they are, but it's also the mortals. Oh, and I know that you can confuse like groups of walkers by like smearing guts all over yourself for a brief time to move through hordes of them. Okay, so hopefully we can learn a bit more about the lore, because if you don't realise, Lore by Night loves a bit of lore. It's like it's his brand or something. Who would have thunk? Okay, so this should be volume 2. Okay, that one I don't need to unwrap at all. I can just like take off the ends and hopefully just slide that one out. Lovely stuff. Oh, they both say the ultimate edition of the New York Times bestseller, and this just as heavy, although it feels significantly more. The Walking Dead Compendium 2. And it has exactly the same blurb on the back, it's just that at the end it says collect issues 49 to 96 of the acclaimed zombie hit. So I suppose this first portion is going to speed up a little bit more now, as we don't have to read as many blurbs as before. This one has a bit more tape on it. I was sitting on a bit that I'll have to spin around. There we go. I'll just unwrap a bit more. Compendium 3 of The Walking Dead. Collect issues 97 to 144 of the acclaimed zombie hit. These are fucking huge. Finally, this should be the 4th one, all looking in great fantastic nick. I'm not wanting to open them too much because I don't want to be spoiled too much with its artwork and its design, though I do know that the first 6 or 7 issues, comics, whatever, of The Walking Dead had one art style, and then it took a completely different art style from there onwards, which has been up for much discussion throughout the years. But no bits and pieces. Basically going this as blind as I can, which, given my experience with the video games and a little bit of the TTRPG, is not a lot. And finally, oh fucking hell, I'm not making this up, these are fucking heavy books. And yeah, it's the same blurb, it's just it says collect issues 145 to 193 of the acclaimed zombie hit. I'm curious, do all these zombie faces at the back line up? No, they don't. Oh, that's annoying. I thought like if you like paired all like the things at the back together, they would like paint a picture. Or maybe they do and I'm just putting them around the wrong way. No, it would appear not. Oh, Jesus Christ. So yeah, there we have it. 4 rather large and heavy books. And I should also mention, I've never been... Oh, these are the wrong way around. I've never been a huge comic person. Not for anything negative, it's just that it's not really much as a big thing in the UK as it is in the US of A. And it's not as always as easy of getting things over from the US to the UK, generally speaking. That being said, there is a comic shop just like a 10-15 minute walk from where I live, but it's just something that I've never had a great exposure with and thus have little interest with. I've read a couple of things over time, but I haven't read comics or graphic novels or manga with such thickness as this. Wow. Like, again, you see it in the flesh and it's different to what you'd see online sort of thing. Like, wow, these are fucking huge. Right. Should crack on reading then, I guess. Because of just how many pages there are and just so much information that this bear with very little brain is going to have to retain, I'm probably going to be doing like irregularly sized little vlog snippets, like detailing every single little bit that I read, rather than doing all of it right at the end. I think that's what I'm going to do anyway. If that ends up changing partway through this video, you fucking know why. Yeah, so I've read up until the point we've had our first death at the camp. That girl, I think it was Amy, has just gone and had a cheeky little slash, and then the camp is just raided by fucking walkers, which they call zombies here at this point. Which is interesting because I didn't think that the Walking Dead universe had like zombie fiction films or whatever. They just treated like George A. Romero just wasn't existed. So to call them zombies here I thought was a bit weird. I don't know if that's like an edit that was made after that, but I was a bit surprised by that. We have a bit of weird sexism in that as well, like the women of the camp go and like do fucking cleaning. One of them's arguing about, I don't know if we'll be allowed to vote again when things go back to normal. And Laurie, Rick Grimes' wife, Rick Grimes being our protagonist here, who was in a coma and woke up to all this shit. What a fucking shit thing to wake up to. Fucking hell. Yeah, she says like a line, something to the effect of, no, this has nothing to do with women's rights, this is just us doing what needs to be done, and like saying, oh, we don't have to be good with guns, we just need to know how to do cleaning and shit. And I kind of get what she's getting at, only a little bit. You know, we shouldn't be complaining about like doing chores, it's just what needs to be done, but they should be able to defend themselves. Like, they need to do more than do the fucking cleaning and fucking cooking, you know? But then again, it's the men that do the cooking around campfires, because like bonfire campfires, that's a manly thing. You know, I feel that could have been worded a bit better. Like, it seems weirdly sexist to me. Like, I'm not going to lose sleep over it for sure, but it just seems like an odd thing to say during the middle of a fucking apocalypse, you know? Shane's deterioration in his mental health is very interesting to unpick and unravel, because he was the one that was in charge. Rick arrives, he seems to be taking a far more good leadership role, and Shane's just like digging his heels into the ground just to have that bit more control. He had Rick's wife, he's now lost her, again, I guess. He just wants to stay put in this camp, people are going to die. I'm going to suspect that that's going to carry on, and more people are going to die as the winter come along, because he's just refusing just to budge that little bit of power that he has. And I don't think it's like totally malicious. Like, he's not like a dictator or anything. I think that's just, he's just been very used to being in Rick's shadow, and he's had this opportunity to prove himself, and it's not working, and he feels guilty about that. Angry that he can't have Laurie, you know, that bit resentful that Rick, his former partner and friend, is back again. But that's just my interpretation of things. I could be wrong when it's revealed, when I suspect Shane is going to be like blown up someplace somehow. Or maybe not, I'm not entirely too sure. I mean, Rick's on the cover of every fucking of the volume, so I think he's going to survive this. But yeah, it's very interesting that we're beginning to see people's mental states fall apart, and that one mechanic guy just completely lost it when the zombies have just come, you know, because they killed his entire family. He was the only one that was able to get out, doesn't say much, and then they come, completely goes cray-cray, which is, you know, understandable. Like, it's all very traumatic for everyone, and everyone's coping and dealing with things in very different ways. And I think it's very interesting how things are panning out in such a short space of time, because the pace of this, despite being like weeks and almost a month now, I think, like time has passed since the apocalypse, it's going at a rapid pace. And I think that works very well in its favour, just to highlight how chaotic things are and how the semblance of time has gone completely up the wazoo as well. And I think if it lingered on things too long, it would feel like it's dragging and it would lose its impact. And you could easily take any of those scenes and stretch them for ages for sure. It would be a very different sort of feel. But this works very well, and I kind of like the contradiction, just how slow the zombies are compared to the fast pace of the action. There's probably some literary device name for that sort of thing. Yeah, it's an enjoyable read so far, and it's not too much for me at this time. So I've read about half of this now. I spent all of today, which is the 31st of July 2025, in the year of our Lord Telos, reading this, and oh boy, has a lot happened now. We have gone from estates which have been filled with the dead that offered false sanctuary where somebody was killed. We've had small little character development arcs, mainly in the form of a Christian middle-aged woman who didn't approve of a relationship with an older man and a younger woman, who died kind of happy because she was able to see the error of her ways as such. Shane got shot by Rick's son Carl, which was not much of a surprise, honestly, but it was interesting to see that it came from Carl, not like the loss of innocence of the child right there.
And of course there was the noticeable drop in the art style. It's not bad by any means. I still think the art that's present in most of the comic now, I guess, is good, but it's nowhere near as expressive and as emotive as the previous art style, the original one that started off the comics. And I tend to forget like who's who character-wise because there's like a load of people to try and remember all at once, and I've gotten them a bit confused. And the newer art style hasn't really helped with all that much. It's just they have very similar faces, and they tend to have like one of three facial expressions: shocked, angry, or stoned slash bored. It's very weird, and sometimes the face doesn't quite match up with what they're saying. I've also noticed that there's like a few more like spelling errors and typos, I guess. Like a notable one for me is like they're clearing out Herschel's farm, which, as a side tangent, I had no idea that Herschel and Glenn were both characters from the comics, and I've since found out that the guy that played Glenn in the TV show appeared in the Telltale games, which is pretty neat. And I love how the fact that Telltale, like, one for one recreated Herschel's farm, including like the wall at the back where the barricade was, which you build in the Telltale games. I think that's a very neat attention to detail there. So Rick and somebody else is clearing out Herschel's barn, which previously had a load of undead in there because Herschel just didn't know what to do with them because he's in this mindset thinking that he can bring them back, which is so sad and tragic, really. And Rick goes like, "Oh, don't be too bad. It will only take a few years to clean that up." Now, I don't know if it meant like days or weeks, probably days, or it was meant to be as like some sort of joke that didn't land right, purely because the face didn't meet up with what was being said at all, and that just happens quite a lot. And as I said, there's a few other typos as well, and I presume that was one of them. So yeah, there's a notable drop in quality overall in the presentation, but the writing and the story itself doesn't drop at all, in my opinion. It's very engaging. There's lots of little conversations between characters and relationships, the meaning of life. There's the reveal, of course, that the walkers, it's not the bite so much that affects you, that just kills you quicker. Everyone's infected and it's dying that brings you back to life. The reveal that they're all going to be spending a huge portion of this content, and most of this so far has been them in this big old prison and dealing with some of the prisoners that are there, and there's been a big old fire and a bust up. Somebody was died because one of the prisoners lied about what they were in jail for. Tax evasion became psychotic serial killer, or revealed as such. And it just shows just how morbid things are, that the idea of like spending the rest of your days in a big old like prison is seen as being perfect, like a home, a sanctuary for all of you. But again, desperate times, desperate measures, sort of thing. It's just, and similar with like the first bit that I started reading, like the action just does not stop. It slowed down a little bit as we're in the prison, but even so, like the different chapters or scenes or whatever go at such a neck break pace that it really doesn't prevent you like to properly take in what's happening. It's all happening so quick and so fast, you don't get to rest like the characters do. Even with these big old time notes of like months, it's almost a year now by the point that I'm reading. Rick has just had a fight with a guy called Teresa, who he finds quite early on, who's for the most part a pretty cool character, but he's a bit shitty as well in places. And again, I think they're all pretty shitty in places, honestly. And whilst Rick is passed out because he fell over the balcony of a prison cell, like they form a committee and they will turn on Rick in a way because he killed one of the nasty prisoners who was going to kill him, and that's why they set this up. And Rick just kind of snaps again, saying that we are the Walking Dead. This is where I'm ending my reading for today. That famous, like, that 2-page spread of, like, we are the Walking Dead. I don't know if that made it into the TV show, but I do understand a little bit that that's quite a famous line within the Walking Dead series, franchise, whatever. It might be famous in the comic world. I don't know. As I've already said, comics is not it's not my forte in written work, shall we say. I feel really bad for Rick. Like, he starts off being very new and, dare I say, naive to this. Like, but he's always has a sense of realism to it, and it's just the leadership role is just sort of thrust upon him, which is unfortunate because who can possibly deal with all those hard decisions? Like, whenever somebody dies and becomes a zombie, he's the one that has to do it. He's having to tell everybody what to do. Like with that fight with Therese, like a character had been bitten and Rick, in desperation, chopped a guy's leg off, just to try and slow down the infection. Doesn't work, unfortunately. And of course, as we found out, they die, they come back to life. So he had this fight with Therese. News comes back that this guy, Alan, that's it, Alan, has died, and Rick goes off to kill him because he doesn't want anybody else to, and nobody else has the stomach to do it properly, really. Like, despite all of that, he still has to do all of that, and there's a bit when he realises how the walk infection actually works. He travels back to where Shane was killed because they buried him, and of course he gets him out of the ground, or the zombie comes out of the ground and puts a bullet in his head to finish him off, the sort of thing. It's just showing like a strange juggling of morals and humanity, like not feeling great at leaving Shane in that state where he would be a walker and like somebody else could put him down, or the amount of harm and damage that Shane can do to other people. It's really heartbreaking stuff, and all the characters have got great dynamics and energies with each other. It doesn't pull any punches with the violence still. And with the artwork as well, I forgot to mention that the more genericness is also carried over with the zombies as well, which I find really frustrating. Just because of how it opens and the walkers are so detailed in a very unique comic booky way. And it's just sort of like generalised in their features a bit more, which I understand why. There's a lot of action going on in their moments in the story where there are a lot of walkers on scene, on set or whatever. But man, it worked well with the other art style, and I wish that just carried on for whatever reason. I'm not too sure why things had changed over, but it is what it is, and as I said, it's not bad, it's just very different. I would just liked it if it was just carried on in that similar sort of format. The one character that I'm not particularly fond of at the moment is Michonne, or Macone. I'm not quite sure the pronunciation of that. I understand that she's a fan favourite, and I'm hoping it's because of something that happens in the TV show, the presentation there, or if it's in the comics, it's something that happens there. I know there is a DLC in the Telltale games where you play as Michonne and like a sort of little like side adventure sort of thing that's detached from the rest of the Telltale universe. And she comes in with these two walkers, I think it's her boyfriend and his friend, or a brother and his friend, or something like that. So something that was close to her. Like on these chains, she's knocked off their jaws, so they're harmless, but she's using it as a form of protection. And she's like very quick and swift, like a katana, which is a very like fucking early noughties, late 90s sort of thing, which is pretty badass. But all of her contributions so far have been suck a guy's dick, which has upset the person that he was in a relationship with. This is Therese, mind you. I think the woman's name was Carol? I think it was Carol. And like, she is so mentally distraught and chewed up and emotionally fragile. She like hits on two people once because she feels so lonely and just needs the attention that she's not really getting with Therese. That she tends to kill herself as she slashes her wrist, and her daughter or somebody else's daughter sees that, and it's quite a gut churning thing. It doesn't show much, just like the hand that just drops on the side of the bed with really good use of lighting, which sort of troubled me for a few personal traumatic reasons I'm not going to go into right now. Yeah, there just seems to be Macone's character at the moment, that she had this short moment of badassery and then is presented as a bit of a slag, which I hope is not going to be the case all the way through this, that we actually see something that's a bit cooler that happens here. You still have that bit of like weird twinge of sexism, like when they form the committee, it's in the prison, it's just all the men, and Rick highlights this, and the character that's explaining to this is like, oh, the women don't feel that they want it, they just want to be protected. It's like, really? It's just so bizarre to me, especially Michonne, who'd already been shown as like a fucking badass, but she's too new into the group to step up to that role, I guess, of the narrative, which is frustrating. I hope that the reason why people like her more is more than just that opening scene, because I'm not really finding much to like at the moment, because we don't actually have a lot to work with as well. On a similar note, Herschel and his kids, particularly his kids, they don't actually have a lot of screen presence either. They're all just killed off, which is really tragic, admittedly, but it's just used as like a weird character development for Herschel rather than having their own moments, which I think is a little disappointing, really. They could have done more of that, but yeah, I get it, there's a load of characters on screen already, but I forget a lot of the time that he has kids, apart from the one that's with Glenn, because they appear quite a bit, and Glenn's kind of important to the story, I gather. But they could have done a bit more with that, like a few scenes here or there, rather than just like having them being killed off by walkers or like a psychotic killer. well, we'll see what happens, I guess, as I carry on reading, like how all of them are going to develop a lot more. Because there hasn't really been like a central villain yet. It's all been like their own inner demons. And I suppose you could make the argument that Therese is kind of one for some of the things that he does. Dexter, who was like a violent inmate, that wants to get everybody out because he doesn't like it that he was accused for the people that were murdered by somebody else. Admittedly, that kind of makes sense. You feel a bit bitter about that because Laurie, Rick's wife, does kind of accuse him because he's in there for murder. So it's like, oh right, you definitely murdered them. So he's like, back in the prison, so you go, I guess. But yeah, I just hope there's a bit more to it, and there is something like a bit more of a goal to work. So maybe just shake things up a little bit. I mean, there's 4 volumes, and I'm aware that on the front cover here, Rick loses his hand, so something's going to happen, presumably. In this scene here, as all wearing prison garb, I'm assuming that something's going to happen in there, but I don't know what it was going to be. Because there's a moment earlier on where like Rick breaks his hand, and I thought it was going to be with that, but no, it's not. So I'm curious to see what happened, and if they introduce like a core villain earlier on, or core antagonist earlier on into this. Because I know that Negan pops up at some point. Like, I think everyone is vaguely aware of Negan. In that, or at least everyone like nerd TV culture, whatever you want to call it. I'm aware of what he does. I don't know the ins and outs of why. So that'll be interesting to learn. I don't think it's going to be at this point in the story. But yeah, I am enjoying it, and I'm hoping that's coming across. I am very much engaged with it. It's just, as of all things in life, nothing's perfect, and this is far from perfect. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish the other half by the end of the day. It's just so happened that this day I had a lot of free time besides a couple of errands around the Lore estate that I was able to sit down and like really engage with it, which is great because I enjoy reading, and I'm very much enjoying reading this so far. I just hope that it continues with the rest of the compendium. So I've just reached the portion of the story where we're introduced to the Governor, and from my limited understanding, the Governor in the TV shows and the comics are pretty much 2 completely different characters. Apart from the fact that they both wear an eye patch at some point, and the one in the comic doesn't currently wear an eye patch, although McCone's just bitten his fucking ear off, but I'll get onto that in a moment. Because I actually want to start a bit before then, because the introduction of the Governor and the things that he does is such a surprise that I kind of do need to talk about it. But there are some actual things besides that I wanted to talk about. Rick, McCone and Glenn have gone outside exploring because they were going to siphon some fuel for a generator that the group have found to try and get some electricity and stuff working to make things easy and safer for them. But 2 of the most able people, and well 3 actually, because Glenn can pretty much look after himself to an extent, going out and scavenging things, have gone chasing after a crashed helicopter that they saw burning in the sky in a hope that it would be saved. Like that pre-apocalypse survival hopeful instinct kicked in, and everybody for the most part was just kind of alright with that, which just goes to show the rapid delirianism. They're all delirious. They think that there's still hope for survival when they see a burning helicopter crash into the landscape and they go chasing after it, which is just a kind of sad state of affairs really. And this affects the group in different ways as we see the groups talking about the different issues and problems, etc. Carol is wanting to marry both Laurie and Rick because they're both really nice to her, but they don't really know each other. I just feel really bad for her because she's just one fucking wrong statement of trying to kill herself again, which is again really sad. Dale and Andrea are looking after somebody else's kids now, and they feel mixed on it, not in a bad way, just stepping up in that level of responsibility. And you also have Axel, who's one of the prisoners, actually one of the only one left that didn't go fucking cray-cray at the first given opportunity, who remarks saying he actually prefers the life that he has now, post-apocalypse. Given his age, his hair, all the tats he has, implies that he's been with gang and criminals all of his life, or most of his life, and or has been in prison for most of his life, or he was sentenced for life at this point. It's just, used to that crime prisoner life, which again is just really sad, just how, I think society fails people in a lot of ways, and the justice system shies away from justice as much as we can. I don't actually remember what Axel was in there for, but it just goes to show just how poor and shit things were, that he actually prefers voluntarily living in a prison with bar doors open, knowing that beyond some fences they're flesh-eating zombies. As I said, it's just really fucking sad to see, and I just hope that he sticks around a bit more, because he seems like a generally nice guy, you know, all things considered and all. But returning back to the governor, Rick, Glenn, McCone go after this helicopter. We find out a bit more about McCone, who was a lawyer who had an aptitude for fencing. Her neighbour has some really pointy, sharp swords. She's very skilled in hunting in these zombies, like very good at listening out what to look for, which is pretty cool. It just goes to show just how independent of a woman that she is, which is kind of cool, I guess, but nothing that makes me like the character a bit more at the moment. And it's when they're exploring, they find this sort of community, because obviously there's nobody at the fucking helicopter. There's clearly a bit of a scuffle with 3 to 4 different bookprints, which Glenn points out the other two don't pick up on, which I think is a bit weird, because I thought if anybody was going to notice that sort of thing, it would be McCone. But yeah, it shows there's somewhat of a struggle going on. Most sane people, I think, would have turned back at that point, but no, they carry on going forward to investigate. They get kidnapped by this community who are doing very well for themselves. They've got electricity, they've got a generator, they've got machine guns, and you know, they clearly outnumber our 3 here. And the governor seems nice for all of 5 seconds, where it turns out that strangers are being kidnapped for their fucking zombie gladiator ring sort of thing, which is an interesting disaster waiting to happen. They know that they're lying about being on the road for as long as they are, because they say that they aren't, because obviously they're trying to protect everybody back at the prison. You know, Rick and Glenn wearing fucking riot gear isn't really helping their case. Of course, they weren't expecting to be kidnapped. Of course, they all made a really fucking stupid decision, particularly McCone, who's been out in the wilds for as long as she has, like surviving on her own with 2 zombies chained up behind her. And the governor, just to show how serious he is about trying to find out what's going on, and basically what he can take from the group, pins Rick down and orders his hands to get chopped off. Because usually with those sorts of things, it's like a finger having a tooth pulled, but now, off with the fucking hand straight away, and it's at this point when McCone tries to help and bites the governor's ear off. Which is pretty cool and fucking bonkers, but it does not end well for them, because Glenn's then put in prison, which is basically a window overlooking a bunch of zombies eating each other. And where I stopped reading for the time being is the governor, raping McCone, basically. You don't see anything, but he's tied her up, he's getting his guards to spread and tie up her legs. And basically she's just there for him to take advantage whenever he fucking pleases. Which is, yeah, there are many ways of showing how messed up an individual is, and I think we've ticked all the fucking edge or criteria, I think. And the scene that's like a 2-page spread of Glenn looking out into this, like, I guess the gladiator pit or whatever it is they're keeping the walkers, feeding upon each other and whatever's thrown in there, is probably the only time I have felt really taken aback properly by the zombies in this newer art style, because it really just focuses on their monstrosity, and it cuts away to the governor talking about how they're not too dissimilar from the humans they once were. They take what they want, they eat what they want, they're content for only a little bit, and then they go after it again, which in the very crudest and animalistic of senses is true, but kind of meets with the very animalistic sense that the governor has of like treating people and providing entertainment, as he words it. Yeah, it's so... It doesn't look good for them so far, but again, the same characters I'm seeing on the front page as the fucking Compendium, so they clearly get out of this, but it's just trying to work out how that may happen and how much damage it's going to do and who's going to survive all this, because honestly it's not looking good, because the only one who can really cope for themselves at the moment is Therese and Axel to an extent, but Rick has been the one, despite this community, is still calling all the shots still, so it's not really working out for them. So I just have this horrible feeling that the governor's folk are going to go to the prison and cause all sorts of mischief. So the governor is a bit more deranged than I initially thought he was going to be, because he's keeping his zombie daughter locked up in his room, acting like she's just being really badly behaved, I think, and also collecting the heads of people that he's killed, notably the 2 people that are in the helicopter, putting them in jars and watching the zombie heads just like float and snap about as entertainment sort of thing, which
It's weird, I guess. It provides some very interesting shock value, I guess. A different strain of one's degrading humanity, but it's not really that engaging as a villain, I have to say. Like, all the emotional stuff that I talked about a moment ago was a bit more interesting, I guess, just to show that this guy's an arsehole, but there's not much development there. There's not really much to get attached to as a character, I feel. Although McCone quickly got her comeuppance, torturing them as the group attempts to escape. She pulled an eyeball out, plucked a fingernail, nailed his dick to a plank of wood, and there was something else that she did as well. Oh, that was it. She chopped off his arm, which didn't kill him, unfortunately, because she had to depart. And I'm saying that she didn't kill him because I don't think that he is dead. There's quite a bit of way of the Compendium to go. Everyone in the prison is talking about how safe they are now. The baby's been born. Thinking about like having a normal life here now. Different characters talking about this, that and the other, just feeling a bit safe, you know, getting extra supplies, weapons for when and if the governor and his crew do try and find the prison, because they are aware that it exists, they just hadn't found it yet. And weeks have gone by and things for the most part seem fairly peaceful. But there's been like a couple things, like Dale has had his leg bitten off and I thought he was going to die, and that was almost upsetting. What else? It was Carol, who she's now properly offed herself because the group bring back a zombie because their new doctor Alice wants to try and study them to see how they work to better to survive themselves, which Rick reluctantly allows to happen despite seeing many instances of this not working. Like, I guess a little bit with the governor's like zombie gladiator pit. He put McCone in there to fight. Right, I won't have my way with you for a week if you like just rough him up a little bit, and she completely ignores and chops off his head and kills the rest of the zombie walkers, which is pretty badass, kind of funny too. Like, why the fuck would she listen to him? And he kind of loses it, I guess, because, you know, he doesn't have that bit of extra power, I suppose. But yeah, the group for the most part alright, as I was saying before I got distracted. Carol, who through her ranting and venting realises that no one's really taking her seriously now, talks to this zombie that they've captured, and she lets it bite on the neck and it kills her. So I did think she was just like one false sentence away from doing it, but I have to admit that her departure was a bit of a surprise, because I wasn't expecting that to wake her up. I thought she would try and cut herself again or hang herself or something, but yeah, that was a real shocker, that one, like, which is weird because all the deaths in me have just been a bit shocking, but that one just really took me back because kind of lost it really. Like, I can understand in this sort of scenario why people would want to give up and struggle to carry on, and I felt really bad for Carol because she just feels alone and lost and mentally and emotionally unstable. And going back to what I was saying with Axel a moment ago, society has failed her in a completely different way. So with things being mostly more peaceful and people getting married and having families and thinking about having families, it's all just going to go terribly wrong. Even with the little scene of the less experienced gun users like going on like a little hunt around the perimeter just to pay attention and so forth, I can only feel that the governor and his crew are going to show up in the most dramatic way possible. Because whilst the group are looking at like this National Guard post sort of thing, and they take fuel and extra weapons and ammunition, somebody remarks, oh, there's a lot of fuel here that's being used quite a bit. There's also this tank. Does anybody know how to drive a tank? I just had this feeling the governor's going to show up in a fucking tank, to be honest, burst through the prison and make shit worse for fucking everyone and their mother. I don't know if that's going to be the case, and if I end up being correct with that guess, I'm a fucking wizard, I suppose. But it's not been very subtle with its storytelling, really, that something is going to go very wrong very quickly, probably unannounced. That it's going to be like something set up on like the last panel of a page, and I expect like a full page or 2 pages of the governor with a dramatic pose or something on top of the tank bursting through or firing an ammunition round or whatever they're called. Yeah, it's great writing, and like it's trying to lure you into that false sense of security, like really dragging its pace out a bit with this bit. But I just feel it's all going to like ramp up very quickly and very dramatically. If I had just waited a few more additional pages before doing that last video segment, I would have seen the dramatic pose and gotten the ending that I envisioned so perfectly. But despite all of that, I was still on the edge of my seat as I was like flicking through the last few pages of this. Wow, there are so many deaths
in such a short space of time. Axel's gone, Andrea's gone, Laurie and the baby's gone. Like, I thought they were going to do like, oh, Laurie would survive and they do like a survivor's mother's guilt sort of thing, but no. Baby got fucking blown up as well. Like, I don't think even in an illustration form I could show like this full page of it just because it's the death of a baby. But yeah, that's again really taken aback by that. There's some real guts, pun not intended. I'm sorry. Like there was some real guts to like follow through with that, because there's often this theme of horror that children are sacred and you really shouldn't kill them off. But no, let's just fucking blow a baby up right at the end. But the whole combat theme was interesting, and of course I was right. The governor had indeed survived, and they show like a quick like time lapse of like from his recovery to where he was now, how they were scouting around the prison, how a supermarket or something were being used by some of the governor's men. Of course, some of them died. That only just sort of ramped up emotions even more. And despite being this big old tough shot of a guy, his people and his ability to control said people are fucking useless. So it wasn't really that great, like a combat focus leader. He's just a bit of a bully and a shithead, honestly. Because the small group of survivors are able to defend themselves pretty well against like the onslaught of the governor's men with a tank that they knew how to barely operate, but they didn't know how to like fire. Thank God. It was really intense and really dramatic. And as I said, despite getting the ending that I envisioned, that I was still left surprised and shocked and taken aback. And of course the prison's completely fucked now because the tank went through the gates as a last resort sort of thing, causing everybody within our survivors to like scatter and flee in different directions in the hope they'll find each other again. As I said, Laura's dead, the baby's dead, and the last panel was like Rick and Carl, his son, like very emotional hug while the prison's practically overswarmed by walkers, and some are coming up the hill to probably munch on their bones, which I don't think it will, given what I keep saying about how there are multiple volumes and there are many issues left. But I don't know what they're going to do now and what the time jump is going to be. And of course Therese is dead now as well. The governor tried to use him as a bargaining chip to get everybody to give up, but they couldn't because they just knew the governor was going to fucking kill them anyway. And a combination of that and fear, and just the governor killed Therese, and he wasn't expecting them to do that. Now he's lost the bargaining chip because he's a fucking moron, and he just doesn't know how to follow up through with that. So he just like sends them back in and gets a bit carried away, for lack of a better phrase, and his crew are both basically swarmed by walkers. His crew turns on him, one of them turns on him anyway, because he forced somebody to kill a mother and a child, which doesn't go down well with the rest of the group, and we don't know what's going to happen with the rest of the group. I'm presuming that they're dead, overswarmed by walkers, but the governor is definitely dead, eaten by walkers now. And one thing I found very interesting, like during this like invasion sequence, is that there's a little bit of Rick acting a bit like Shane, because for the last few months they've set up like this place as a home with growing crops and sustaining themselves. They haven't really had a need to go outside, other than it's Rick doing something and then putting everybody in danger because he's the one that controls everything. Whenever he fucks off a little bit, everything just goes to shit. And he's adamant not wanting him to flee and get away, even though that's the most sensible thing here, because they know they've got more firepower. They've seen that they've got a fucking tank here, even if they don't know how to fire its weapons. Like, that's gonna fucking kill people just through rolling down. They've got nothing that can take that out. But Rick is determined to stay there just for a little bit, like, oh, they're probably prepared for this and that. Just having a bit of control, that bit of that safe space and sanctuary. I just thought there was a little slight similarities between the two of them there. Not much, but it was something that just made me stop and go, was this intentional or not? Was this something that I'm probably overthinking? But yeah, it was a very engaging read, and in just under a week I have officially begun my journey into The Walking Dead, and I'm really excited to see what happens now in Compendium 2. So
So the second compendium starts off pretty much as the last one ended. McCone arrives back at the prison and see just how fucked everything is, and then buggers off. And then we go to the perspective of Rick and Carl, who again are doing their best to survive in a little townhouse sort of thing. But Rick becomes ill for a few days, and it just left for Carl to look after Rick for a little bit, who twice thinks that he's turning and becoming a walker. And we see a little bit of Carl's stability here at this point, which I think is incredibly sad, because Carl hasn't had much of a life at this point now, and it's just mainly surviving, hardly thriving. And he feels really upset because he feels that his dad is responsible to various people dying. Now his dad's out of the counter at this point, so he doesn't hear his cut or crying his eyes out. And it's like saying he can protect himself, like, because his dad can't, which is just really fucking sad. And it's also really sad that a few pages after that, some walkers arrive. No, it's not some walkers. He thinks his dad is turning into a walker again. And he starts crying, he's like, no, Dad, please don't turn, I'm only a kid, I can't look after myself. I mean, it's also quite funny, in a sense, but it's like really sad, just no one's really paying that much attention to the kids. It's just the adults doing the adult things, and no one really has the mental fortitude and the energy for the kids. And when Rick comes through again, we see a bit more of Rick's failing mentality as he hears a phone ring, and for a bit we think it's like another community that's found them, or like got a phone to work, which is a bit unusual. But then we realise that Rick's hearing Laurie talk to him in his head, and he actually takes this phone with him because he'll be able to hear her again, at least in his head, if he has that phone to prompt the phone conversation, which is really sad. Just how it's affected him, and neither one of them have spoken to each other about missing their mum too much, and wife respectively, of course. It's just really sad and tragic, and it's not just the mum but the baby, which hasn't been mentioned at all. I can't recall or remember or registered the baby being registered at all, mentioned at all rather. Yeah, it's just a bit upsetting and sad. McCone finds them when they hit on the road again, and then Glenn and Maggie find them on the road, and everybody goes back to Herschel's farm, where everybody else who survived that is there. Maggie is obviously pretty distraught, the rest of her family's gone. And then we have some new characters to play around with. A trio of survivors with a pickup truck arrive looking for supplies. We have a trigger-happy soldier with some bit of like survivor's guilt sort of thing going on, called Abraham, who is a bit concerned about his mental well-being, that we see later on, being a bit trigger-happy, but quite frankly he has been a bit of a dick. And you have accompanying them his wife or partner, whatever, called Rosetta or Rosina or something like that. And then you have Eugene, who claims to be a scientist who was working with Washington, who had developed the virus as a biological weapon, red flag number 1, who claims that he knows how to fix all of this. Red flag number 2, what the fuck is that guy doing down in fucking Alabama? Sorry, not Alabama, sorry, Atlanta, and not Washington. There's a considerable amount of difference between the two there. So why is he down there? So basically there's a whole load of shit, and because there's a whole load of shit, the group decides to go off with them and abandon the farm, where things weren't the safest place in the world, but at least they could defend it a little bit, you know? Which is frustrating, and I just can't wait to see what happens to this group, who once again are chasing the need and the desire to things to return as what they once were. But of course we all would do, really, deep down inside in such a situation. But it's been about a year now, have all this has been going on. The human race, of whatever's left, is scattered like the wind, like cockroaches under the sun. Things aren't going back to normal. They are positively fucked, mate. Abraham's dickishness comes a little bit later, where a group set up a camp somewhere, then goes to check up on Maggie, who was taking a leak but finds she's actually hanged herself. Which was very surprising, because I saw her to be one of like the stronger characters, emotionally speaking, but having your family massacred one after the other, in terms of reading space, not a huge space of time, but in the space of a year she has lost all of her family through various violent means, and Glenn just wants a few moments to say goodbye before they get rid of her. But Abrams like pulls him away and attempts to shoot her, and you know, Rick challenges him, you know, that maybe she's alive. Says, no, we have to kill her now. And then of course Maggie comes through, and Abraham sort of realises that he's made a bit of a blunder, but doesn't actually apologise it because he's a big, strong, burly man, and big, strong, burly men don't do that sort of thing. Although it does have the trust and the emotional insecurity to confide in his partner about it, I suppose. It's also interesting to note that because Abraham has sort of stepped up as like the leader role, Rick isn't liking that very much. He doesn't trust them. I mean, trust them enough to let the group decide the fate of everyone else, I suppose. Just another bit of trauma that'll be dumped on him at a later point. It's interesting to see that whenever his leadership is challenged, he goes off on one. I'm editing this large video as I go, which is something I tend to do with all of these larger video projects, and the second compendium is just many different instances of me just saying, this is really sad, this is really tragic, and it is. There is just so much fucking sadness, because a lot of it's through the aftermath of all the fucking shit of the prison, but there's even more shit to deal with now. The group decide which way to go to try and get to Washington as quick as they can, and Abraham and Rick sort of decide that they're going to go off in a different direction to pick up more resources, because they're close to Atlanta now, which is where the police station was, and Rick's going to see if there are any more guns and weapons and the like still at the police station. So they go and do that, and Carl comes along because he's unsure about leaving his son Carl on his own, which, to be fair, makes a lot of fucking sense, despite the amount of danger that's probably going to put him in. But then again, is he any better off, like, in the care of everybody else there? Who fucking knows? So Abraham, Carl and Rick head off in the car, stop on the side of a road sort of thing, and they get woken up in the middle of the night by these three bandit raiders, whatever you want to fucking call them. When they don't give up their supplies to these three, they then go on the offensive, and attempt to do unspeakable things towards Carl, a little boy. He's not that little anymore, I suppose, but I don't think I need to talk about that too much, given the fact that I've already probably mentioned that once or twice too many, and YouTube is already going to give me a slap on the wrist for that. But it's really dark and grim. You don't see anything, it doesn't actually happen, and Carl's not hurt in any way, but it is very nearly. But the thing that people sort of tend to remember about that scene, from what I have seen online already, is that Rick, in retaliation to all of this, bites a huge fucking chunk out of some guy's neck in retaliation, and goes off and shanks somebody who runs away to death. And Carl just sits there and watches. Which just shows, again, the plummeting humanity of our group of survivors, which leads to a very sad heart-to-heart with Abraham and Rick, who had to deal with something similar, because his wife and daughter, I think he's got other kids as well, where similar unspeakable things happen to them, and it's all very sick and fucked up. But Abraham feels a lot more fucked up by it inside, and hasn't gotten over it as well as Rick has, which again just shows the contrast of the two characters, that I feel a bit more sympathy now for Abraham, because he sort of had to put up this wall, like this, perhaps this dickish persona, just to deal with it, really, not be too trusting and being the one in charge, feeling awful that he scared his family for them to fuck off, and then this shit happens. And Rick's like, oh well, it's trying times, you got to do what you got to do, and Abraham's not buying that as much, you know, which is sad, which sort of leads on to a similar moment with Carl when he pops out, like he doesn't feel bad about killing Shane, he doesn't feel bad about watching his dad kill somebody else. So it's just interesting how the old and the new survivors meet, and how they're dealing with things, and how the law-abiding cop isn't as law-abiding as he once was, which is very sad and tragic. So they go on a bit more, and they do manage to get guns and whatnot from the police station, because nobody has managed to pick it up in that time. And there's another really sad bit when they go past their own home, and Carl's like, I recognise this place, but he doesn't say it's his home. That's for us to find out, like, shortly afterwards, which is really interesting. And again, really fucking sad that the son, like, kind of remembers what their own home looks like, but doesn't get too excited, like, oh god, we're back home again, you know, stuff like that, because he's just sort of aware and with it enough to know that they can't stay here. Which I have to say is kind of refreshing from what I've seen with the Telltale Walking Dead games and other bits of Walking Dead stuff that I've engaged with, which is a nice change of pace of things. But in going back to their home, they find Morgan, who was the guy at the beginning of The Walking Dead, who sort of gave Rick the rundown of what's been happening so far. His son didn't make it, he's now a walker, and Morgan just can't get himself to, end his son, which is again really sad. And he gets a gun from Rick to go and do the thing, and we are led to believe, or at least I am led to believe in one panel where you see the gunshot go off, that he killed himself, or at least that was the impression that I was getting, because Morgan is not in a great place at all. Then you see him leave the house and you think, oh shit, he did kill him, but then you see he didn't kill him. His son was tied on with a chain, and he just shot the chain and just let him go, and the group are fucked off again to get the guns and then head back home. It's like, ooh, that's again really fucking sad, because our group of survivors are able to do these sorts of things. But Morgan, who has been on his own, who hasn't had those people to calm him down, give him that pep talk or whatever, and this is all that Morgan has really, his son, and he just couldn't do it. And I'd be curious to see what the group would make of this, should they ever find out. I don't think he's going to come up again, but it's a rather, again, a significant difference of morality and humanity, I guess. And on their way back in the car, they then come across a massive horde, or herd, as they started calling them, of walkers. Like, Rick guesses it's about 2,000 strong, and they very barely manage to get away, trapping themselves in a house for a little bit. Morgan has an unpleasant encounter where he finds a family who have all killed themselves in one way, poisoned, bits of their heads drilled in just to make sure. And then the father blew his brains out. And the reason why that Morgan finds all of this is because they're all trying to find stuff that makes noise, because they know that they won't be able to hold them off, so they're trying to find a distraction. Doesn't work very well, but it's a very interesting survival thing, just to try and distract them, just to give them a bit of time. I haven't seen a lot of this survival tactic. It's more like just putting up a brick wall and hoping for the best, but this is smart, this is clever, and I like this sort of different tactic here. And showing all this traumatic stuff with Morgan is sort of leading, suggesting that something bad is going to happen with Morgan, or he's going to do something really fucking rash, which is a shame, because he seemed like a nice guy. And again, I just feel so bad for all these fucking characters and all the different shit that they're going to. And Dale, who's like one of my favourites at the moment, and he's really concerned, angry, anxious, whatever, of all the danger that Rick keeps throwing everybody into. And whilst I think that Dale has got a good fucking point here, we can't put all the responsibility on Rick here. But then again, when I was complaining about Shane earlier on, I was putting all the blame on one person. But then again, don't they have a fucking committee of now people? And most of its members are still alive still, but it's still that's Rick that's calling all the shots, so people just don't want the responsibility. They just want Rick to deal with it, because Rick is the one that's dealing with everything. Which is, again, just very interesting to see how this little pocket of society works. But our survivors do manage to escape the herd of zombies, which is great. So there's a bit of peace and levity in that, but just a couple of pages until you see that one of the twin boys has killed the other in cold blood, which was incredibly shocking to find, because all the suicides or attempted suicides and deaths have all had some decorum of sensibility with them. This it doesn't, and this is psychotic, really. And I haven't mentioned the twin boys all that much in this review. They've sort of been banded together with the kids, and to be fair, that's kind of how the comic has treated them as such. It serves as a backdrop for other people to talk about their own emotions, like, oh, it's so nice that such and such are really peaceful, it reminds me of such and such, and then they sort of waffle on from there. But the boys who go for a toilet break, one of them has a knife and kills his brother in cold blood, which has led the group to discuss what the fuck to do with him. And it very quickly went down the route of, we need to kill him. He is a liability. And Abraham brings to the point that if society was normal, he would be locked away in a loony bin and wouldn't get any fucking help, which is a very interesting political comment, I must say. At least right. He would be locked away either in a madhouse of some description, or an asylum, or mental institute, whatever the fucking US calls it over there, or however the book words it. I don't really remember which, so apologies for my crass language. Or he would go to some form of prison. Not to live in luxury, but to, actually serve his fucking time. And yeah, it's all terribly messed up, but it all makes sense within the context of that scenario. The boy doesn't know what he's did or why he even did it. The worrying bit is the fact that he doesn't remember doing it and is unsure why he's been locked away in the van. And now everyone's having to decide what's best for him. Who's going to be the one to kill him, which is incredibly messed up, and it's, again, a real sad thing on the kid who sees these adults killing people time after time again, and it's absolutely fine. They feel that they're helping them, putting out of their ease. He's overheard, clearly, a lot of these conversations, even if he hasn't been completely present for it. But alas, it's had a huge fucking effect on his mental stability, and is now fucking shanked his brother and doesn't even know why. So it'll be interesting to see how the group follows through with this. That is, once they've dealt with a fucking weird-ass priest that's come out of nowhere, talking about, oh, do you want to share the word of our Lord? No, fuck off, mate. We're in a bit of a fucking moral crisis. And an apocalypse with the dead walking about. You fucking weirdo. Like, I don't, again, another fucking red-ass flag, but I just feel the group's gonna fucking wander off with them because he promises fucking food and safety in a fucking ass church, which a lot of you American ones are made out of fucking plywood. So apparently, if I just waited 1 or 2 more pages to read before doing the previous section, I would have found out it was Carl that fucking killed Ben. Like, he took it upon himself to kill Ben because nobody else wanted to. Man. Like, talk about father like son, and done in such the dramatic, borderline edgy way with the lighting and Ben turning to Carl saying, "You scared of me?" And Carl goes, "No." Like, you find out later on, like the end of the section, which I'm presuming, like in the original comics, that's where that specific volume issue theme would end, and then it would move on to the next one where a time jump happens, which is where I'm starting to read next, and it's in that time jump where Carl and Rick are talking about, oh, we haven't spoken to each other in a few weeks, so you want to talk about what happened with such and such, with Ben, I should say. And Carl explains that basically he did what he needed to do because nobody else couldn't do it, and then he starts to feel a bit more remorseful because, you know, Ben was his friend, which he hadn't done before. He was like trying to put on this tough guy persona because he was weak and like it was a liability, but without using those exact words, although he does refer to him as weak just in the heightened state of emotion in the previous bit before the time jump that I just alluded to. I'm sorry if this is a bit confusing, but I don't actually plan scripts for this. I don't know if that comes across. But again, really fucking sad and tragic shit. And I would not have expected Carl, of all fucking people, to do that. Again, I was just expecting Rick, because Rick is the one that does all this difficult shit. But alas, it was fucking Carl. Oh, boy. And the way that Carl comes about and admitting this to Rick, before the time jump, that is. Time skip, or rather. Jump skip, whatever. I'll get onto that in a moment, but I actually need to go back a little bit first. So the group are taken to this church that this priest guy is, like, keeping an eye on. Like, it's his haven, whatever you want to fucking call it. And the priest dude is not doing anything untoward, even though the group is being followed and Dale gets snatched away by some people. And prior to that, there's a bit of a zombie attack as well. And people begin to think that the priest guy's involved with, like, them being stalked or watched or whatever. And it turns out this priest guy, he thinks that the group's come onto them to, like, punish him, that they're sent by God or whatever, because he didn't open their doors to his flock when in time of need. He barely had enough food himself, which makes sense. But all this, like, very stereotypical and, dare I say, boring representation of Catholicism or Christian priesthood throughout this little section of the book. Not very priestly-like, is it? It's not very open and forgiving and, like, open to the house of God. He could have been a protector, like a sort of Noah and the flood sort of thing, but alas, he gone and fucked up, and people do eventually believe him because it's very fucking clearly he has nothing to do with it. And Dale gets snatched away and he loses another leg because he's got captured by the people who are following him, and the people that are following him and the rest of the group are fucking cannibals. Which is messed up, but I kind of get why they're doing it. And Dale doesn't seem to be too bothered by this, at least not at first, because even though he is missing another leg now, he admits that he took himself off to the woods to die because he got bitten by a walker. So they've eaten tainted meat. And I won't lie, when I read that, I just fucking laughed out loud, because you get what's fucking coming to you. I mean, it's fucking stupid, really. Like, eating other people when you've got shit like that going on. Like, who knows the sort of, like, pathogens and the germs and all that shit? And also, eating people is not the best thing to do anyway, even in a fucking crisis. And doing it as frequently as they appear to be doing is not great either. So Dale gets dumped back by the group as, like, to prod and tease them, like they're playing some fucking mind game with them. So Abraham, Nashone, Andrea, and Rick all go out to confront them and, like, set an ambush up on them. And they get killed, as one would expect, but a very chilling set of little panels that splits things up
pun not intended, they chop them up. Bit by bit, bone by bone, and then like throw them in a fire or whatever, which is a very over the top way for this particular group of survivors to be doing things, and they'll die shortly after just because of the blood loss and the shock and everything else that goes with that. And Rick stays behind a little bit as the group begins to fuck off, and Rick just gives us like his final words, like just saying how awful he felt about doing what he did, admitting about chopping them up, slicing them and all the rest of it, and just like he closes his eyes and that's all he can see. And he thinks that he's saying this all to Abram, who was standing behind, and it's when he turns, he sees Carl is there. And that's when Carl admits that he killed Ben. If there's any fucking kid in this show that should be a fucking psychotic nutter, it should be Carl. Because imagine hearing that from your dad of all things, who he's meant to be your protecting, loving you and all the rest of it. But that's not protecting your people. Like, it could have been a very simple execution, like a bullet in the head, slitting their throats, tying them up. Like, just, there could have been all sorts of things they could have done on varying levels of fucked upness. Like, the best thing to do if you're going to kill or execute somebody like that is perhaps line them all up and then just shoot them all in the head. Again, not great. Or you slit their throats and they bleed out that way. Or if you're being a bit cruel, you could feed them to a group of walkers, so to speak. But that does also create the risk of them coming back if they're not eating properly. But what happened here is just fucking twisted. Like, it just goes to show how angry these group of people have made our group, how they angered Rick as well. Because again, Rick is the one calling the shots. Rick is the one that's organising everything. And the other three just go with it. They've got no problem with anything that's going on here. And I haven't read anything yet that would confirm that the other three feel particularly bad about what's going on here. But I'm sure that's going to come up at some point or another. Probably through Abraham, Nicone or Nichone rather, might say or do something about it. And I'm slowly coming around to her character, because I know I was a bit harsh at the beginning with, but there wasn't enough for me at the time to latch onto her. But she's a very interesting character, which may or may not be tied to the fact that I've recently played the Telltale Walking Dead spin-off thing called Michonne or Macone. I'm not entirely too sure the pronunciation of that. So I have that to lean onto a bit as well, and I've sort of seen that and her story out of context there. But regardless, it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the group deal with that, and whether everyone else knows what Rick and everybody did, because that's just messed up somewhat, I think. And I'm just going to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about Dale and Rick and the book's representation on disability. Yes, it's grim and it's horrific, and they don't shy away from this sort of things, and through its swift pacing, they do talk about the struggles that each of the characters have, and through these time jumps and skips, they do process and talk about things. But they don't leave them behind, they don't make fun of them, there isn't any ableism in this, where they don't leave them or treat them how some other antagonists, particularly the Walking Dead that Telltale did. You've got Carver, who kills that guy with the one arm, whose name I've completely forgotten. That he sees them as weak, as incompetent, as letting everybody down, just cutting off the wee bits of plant sort of thing. No, this group doesn't do that, and the author doesn't focus on that element of it either. Now, that may come up with different antagonists here, but it's really nice to see that they're showing how these characters are becoming disabled and how they're coping and overcoming things, and how, with the right mindset and the group of people, that they're coping. And the people who have said disabilities, it's not so much focused on them oh, worries me, I don't have legs anymore, I don't have arms anymore, which of course would be fucking horrific. And yes, it also makes sense, because in those sorts of times you can't really focus about that sort of thing, you just have to overcome and adapt. But it could have gone very easily in a direction, especially with some of its earlier writings and the weird levels of sexism that still persist in this book. But I'm digressing. It's really cool the group's helping them overcome that and making prosthetics. They haven't worked out what to do with fucking Rick's arm yet, though. But they're walking around on a fairly functioning peg leg sort of thing, a nice prosthetic that they've made. And I just think that's really cool, especially for the early 2000s that this came out. I'm looking there because I've got the book there, and I can't be bothered to pick it up and look, but it's just really nice and comforting to see. And they could flesh those bits out and talk a bit more Dale's frustrations, or Rick not getting used to things. It was kind of leading up to that point because it's the hand that Rick buggered all his fingers up earlier on when he was like beating the shit out of Therese. Yeah, as a disabled person myself who's like does a lot of advocate stuff for disability and autism and all the rest of the things I've done before on the channel, that's an oddly wholesome bit in this really grim world that ableism doesn't really have a place here, and racism does either. I know that, again, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because the world is gritty and nasty and you still have fucking rapists and pedos that are going about doing their thing, but I like it that those elements are presented as clearly monstrous, and the people who are disabled and mutilated are not treated as monsters, that they are just people that just survive and cope with everything else that's in the world. I like it, and I hope that the rest of the book goes through that, and maybe if there's an antagonist that's a bit like that, it's just shown just to be a bit bitter and cynical and that behaviour is challenged, I don't mind that comparison being there. I'm just glad that it's not the default mindset of the author of depicting disability, mutilation and those other sort of physical handicaps. It's, as I keep saying, it's good shit.
So Eugene, as expected, was a fraud of some description, but it wasn't exactly what I had in mind, because I was expecting some sort of like nutter psychopath that was leading into uncertain experimentation or death, or something else particularly grim. But he's a high school teacher who just lied his way through the fucking apocalypse, which is impressive, but really frustrating, but for two reasons. One, Dale should be alive right now, and second of all, the group hasn't done anything about it, really, especially Andrea, which I'd expected she'd lose her fucking shit. But it's mainly Abraham that's done it, probably because he's got the closest connection to him. But there is a reason why that hasn't happened, and this is a very interesting twist in the plot. Similar with the situation with Ben, the group sort of has a bit of a conversation about what to do with this liability, and they're interrupted by a seemingly friendly stranger who's offering them sanctuary and food, and a much larger community to be a part of, which, surprisingly, everybody agrees with, probably because they're just fed up of starving, they just want a bit of security for once, and Rick is the one that's the most sceptical with it, which kind of makes sense here. So they go off, they do a bit of a rescue mission or on the way, and they stop by this walled off community just outside of the city of Washington, which is interesting because we begin to see some mirrored parallels between this and how the comic began with the little community / survivors just outside the city of Atlanta. Rick, of course, has every right to be sceptical about it because there's a lot of parallels also to the whole fucking Woodbury governor incident where they've had most of their losses in casualties. Like, there's clearly something more sinister that's been hidden here. Like, that's where the danger is, that this is a trap. Well, the very interesting thing is that this community is the exact inverse of that. They are genuinely really safe, perhaps too safe, naively so, if that's even a word. It definitely is now. Where they have a little chat with the leader of this community, a guy called Douglas, who replaced somebody else called Davidson, whose name should not be spoken because he did something untoward we don't know yet. From former life, this guy called Douglas, who's the one in charge now, was a Democratic congressman of Ohio, and basically they don't want anything untoward happening. They don't want the group to have all their weapons and stuff about, except for Michonne, who has her sword hanged up in her home now for sentimental reasons, and it's making everybody feel really on edge. Like, they're all sharing a house at the moment, even though they can divvy themselves up from actual homes with running hot water and electricity. But they're just so on edge and so used to staying together that it's this survival tactic thing. And it's making me think a little bit of AJ from Season 4 of The Walking Dead, which, even though they all have a life prior to that, this is just what they're used to, and they're just super fucking overcautious and paranoid about everything. Of course, the difference of AJ in that scenario, this is the life that he knows, and Clementine just taught him to be like that because that's what she's been taught to do, and really that's kind of the life that she knew as well, other than the first few years of being a fucking toddler sort of thing, but kind of waffling away here. And everyone's really on edge because this group just does not seem to be taking the outside world seriously. Like, Romans aren't just going to disappear and go away. It's making everybody weak, in case there is an attack, in case there is another group that comes along. And Carl's the one who's most eloquent about it, because we already know he has this big fear of becoming weak, like being able to protect people and look after himself. and he's the one that says it best, really. And Rick is beginning to stage a coup of getting their weapons back and potentially taking the place from Douglas. And I think it's very interesting that there's a point of Douglas saying that he was a democratic congressman, because with what the community is set up to be, it kind of feels like a political jab that the Democrats are peaceful but don't really do anything. They're rather ineffective at their job, which I think is kind of funny. Now, that could just be me looking into things a bit too much, but with current events going on in the world and my lived experiences as a teenager in Britain and seeing what the left fucking do, I think it's pretty fucking deliberate, honestly. And it's also interesting that with this coup that's about to happen, or this plan to get their weapons back, it's turning them into the villains. I was sort of wondering who was going to be the main villain of this. I thought it was going to be this person who found the group. I was beginning to think it was Douglas. I was kind of expecting Eugene. Gabriel was still with the group for some fucking weird reason, despite the fact he hasn't been mentioned in ages. I kind of forgot he even existed. But no, it's starting to become Rick. It's starting to become the group who can't settle, can't have this new peaceful life, that they have to be at odds and tear other people apart and just claim what is their own, making them no better than other bandits and whatnot that they've dealt with already. And that's already excluding the fact that I've just waffled on about how they fucking chopped up people. You know, cannibals, maybe, but as I've already said, there are much better ways of dealing with that than just, well, that. So it'll be very interesting to see how this pans out and just how much of this compendium will focus on the group in this community now, or whether they'll be exiled, like they've got some sort of secret weapon or plan to kick them out sort of thing, in case something like this happens. But they seem really ill-equipped to be dealing with anything, worrying about the more old world squabbles and domestics, as it were. Douglas is a bit surprised when it's suggested to him by Rick that Andrea should be on a lookout post in the bell tower, and he goes, "What's a lookout?" Like, they're not even really attempting to protect themselves. They don't see the need to. As I said, they have to hand in their weapons. It's all peaceful, cuddly, fluffy rainbows and sparkles, despite everything that's going on in the world around them, everything that the group has experienced for the last year and a bit. It's all just sad, really. Just the two different contrasts of each other, that society and the world around them has changed too much now, and we've gone beyond the point of return to things where they once were. And even if a new government or the walkers do go away, what will rise from the ashes, I feel, will be too different to return to normality, personally. So Rick hasn't quite staged his coup yet, but he has kind of lost it pointing a gun at somebody. Although you could argue with what I'm about to share with you, it may be valid, especially from where he is coming from. So Rick, being a police officer in this new community, discovers that a guy called Pete, who's a doctor, has been beating two bells out of his missus, and has started recently giving his son the same treatment. Now, Rick obviously is not too happy with this, hence how I just started this segment off, and how, you know, he's got a son, trying his best to look after and protect him, everything that Laurie's been through, well, her being dead and all, and his now deceased daughter, he sort of takes it upon himself to go and punish him, like breaks into his home and beats the shit out of him. Which is done, may I add, in full view of said wife and son. The two go flying through a glass window, and which of course gets the attention of everybody else in the community. And Rick, in a sort of feral, angry state, draws the gun that he'd been able to pinch via Glenn and like point it at Douglas, the Democratic leader guy, you know, and just sort of like threatening that he was doing his job, this, that and the other. And it's Michonne that sort of snaps into his senses by hitting him over the head with a fucking rock and like telling him to get shit together. Douglas gives him a bit of a chat, like, "Can I trust you with this? Like, do what needs to be done, but don't ever question my authority again." Of course, Pete and his missus are separated, and Pete attempts to kill his wife and son out of pure anger, and possibly Rick as well, as we're dealing with the funeral of somebody else who died through other means that we don't know about. And in said rage, Pete accidentally slashes at Douglas's wife, who was like very old worldy, like, innocent, shall I say, or ignorant, say, Pete, what the heck do you think you're doing? That sort of scolding like that was going to fucking calm him down. It didn't, and Douglas instructs Rick to blow his fucking brains out. And shortly after that, we get a bit of an invasion scenario, because Glenn and somebody else went into the city to get supplies, and they're waiting around for ages because they can't get to where they need to go because there's a load of walkers nearby. And it's actually Douglas that says the term walkers for the first time. As far as I'm aware, we're like a good chunk way through the Walking Dead comics, and it's not our survivors that refers to walkers as walkers, it's Douglas. And I think that's really, really interesting. I was thinking it was going to come from Rick or somebody, but no, it's from the fucking Democratic person. So they're waiting for ages and they see this group, and like one of them pushes out their own into the streets to buy some time, which is fucking cold ass shit, you know, not really caring for those around them at all. Glenn and someone else are able to get back to the community with motorbikes, but this group hears the motorbike and they think, okay, where they're going. They're travelling and following them for a bit, and then they hear the gunshot of Rick blowing Pete's brains out. They thought, that's a gunshot, that's not too far from here. And that's when they show up the community and they attempt to take over pretty badly, because Rick had everything all organised with Andrea in the clock tower, and presumably his people like covering him from either side, because we don't know who was brought out with him, but he got some people out of him, like Abraham and Michonne, you know, making sure that people don't leave the church. But yeah, Rick just sort of launches into action when they hear an additional gunshot, and Douglas kind of admits that, yeah, I'm not fit to run this place, you do. They don't need me as a leader, they need you. Which I find really interesting, because I was expecting Rick to take over the place by force, you know, he's collecting these weapons, he has that conversation with somebody like, oh, we'll take over, we need to. And I thought that was the direction they were going to, and the rest of his group would like understand, but no, they don't. They all think that Rick's worrying too much, which, given everything that's happened and how he's sort of been forced into that leadership role, which he actually confides in Douglas about, which he hasn't really done a lot, which is very interesting that he does it with Douglas, because it's sort of, they understand each other, like neither one of them really wanted to be the one in charge. It's just, for what circumstance, these things just sort of happen and they just sort of roll with it because they sort of have to. And now if they step down, things are going to go completely shits up. That is, of course, you know, before Douglas realises that Rick is in fact the one that should be leading everybody. He knows what to do, he knows how to put shit together. Douglas isn't capable of leading these people anymore because he didn't have a fucking clue what to do. Although we didn't really see him get that opportunity, because Rick and his folks just sort of launched straight into it, really, as one would expect. So it'll be interesting to see how things carry on now. And I wasn't, as I was saying before I got a bit sidetracked, I was expecting Rick to have that full takeover. But no, it was slightly more subtle, I suppose. You know, just Douglas seeing for himself the sort of capable leader that Rick is, that he can't protect the people from the outside world. And it was just really simple things that led these bandits, or whatever you want to call them, raiders or whatever, these group of nasty folk to come and attempt to take over the community, when Rick kind of highlights, well, if you just asked nicely, we'd have fucking brought you in, we could do with more people here, but now they not want to take the opportunity. And, you know, from what we have seen so far with Rick's lot, I can understand why these other people might be a bit suspicious, like hoping they can take everything for themselves. So violence ends with violence, as they say, I think. And I almost forgot that all the gunfire that's been happening has gotten the attention of the walkers, which just goes to show how much danger these group of people are, because they're not that far away from the city, which is where all the fucking activity's going on. I mean, walker activity, that is. And it's kind of interesting and funny that as I'm rambling away about this, I forget about the fucking zombies. But that's something that The Walking Dead does really well, that it's very much focuses on the human drama, that every so often drops zombies into the mix just as an ongoing threat, just to keep people on their toes when it's not those pesky humans doing those pesky rapscallion things. Yeah, it's interesting that one can forget that, especially with what I mentioned earlier on about, you know, that big old panel of somebody having everything torn out of them because they were being eaten by the Walking Dead. Oh, I say,
The Walking Dead, more like The Walking Gay. I mean, all jokes aside, this is actually pretty neat. Again, just relating it back to the thing I was saying about disability and representation earlier on. And it's also kind of sad, really, that if this was put in a comic or any bit of fucking media these days, a certain group of dickheads would having a fucking fit and pooing their nappies all over it and causing online riots. Because it's not like horror and queer culture have been bedfellows for like fucking decades now. Stupid fucks. So as expected, a shitload of walkers came and burst through the little camp community that they have there. Because the walls that they have are not particularly thick, they're basically just hammered into the fucking dirt. So of course they were going to push through, and Rick tries to reinforce it by having some trucks and whatnot pushed there, but it doesn't work. Walkers by the hundreds swarm through, and oh fucking boy, was that an emotional roller coaster. It's one of the few times I have felt genuinely concerned, worried, frightened for the sake of the characters, because yeah, I know there's more of it to come, but I don't know how much of the cast is going to come and go. Obviously Rick's going to be there, I feel Michonne's going to be there, but I feel there's going to be a huge fucking casualty. This is really the first time that we have seen the walkers being a proper threat, because a lot of the time it's been people being careless or little pockets burst through, but the group has always been able to handle walkers. He was running away or dealing with them, but there was just too many of them to deal with here. And it's kind of a miracle that not as many people we see so far have died. There was a couple of people on guard duty that have watched. Morgan's dead, because he went into the scene to help Rick out, and he was bitten, and Rick chopped off his arm, the opposite arm that Rick had lost, interestingly enough. He gave that final talk to Carl, the one that really his father should have had with Carl, because remember, Morgan was the one that saw Carl kill Ben a while ago. Saying don't let it define you, the sort of thing, you did what had to be done. His father didn't do any of that, but Morgan sort of delirious. They start treating him as his own son, Dwayne, which sort of shuts down all the emotional response that Carl was having with it, because he's been very detached from those who are living and dead now, which is sad. Michonne unloads her feelings because she was kind of cruel and unsympathetic towards his case, because Morgan feels really bad that he was wanting to start a relationship with Michonne because his wife had died and he lost his son, and he kept mentioning it, which I can understand Michonne's reaction, saying he should be ungrateful, insultingly so, he just needs to fucking move on. But not that I'd expected to know this, but Morgan's had a very different set of experiences to Michonne, to the rest of the group, so he's been living by himself all this time, so it's a lot harder for him to deal with. And the fact, remember that his son, he couldn't kill his son, had him chained up as a walker in his own home and then set him free. So all of this is a lot more difficult for him to process. Michonne is unloading her feelings to Shai, and she asks for forgiveness from Morgan, but by the time she gets to that in a little speech, Morgan's already dead. And Michonne does what she always does, locks away her feelings again and puts off this cool badass persona and goes into fighting to help Rick. And they attempt to escape. Rick, Rosie, I think her name is, Jessie, who was the wife of the guy called Pete, who was killed by Rick not too long ago, and those two sort of had a fling for a few pages. Both her and her son were eaten by walkers. It was her son first, because Michonne and Rick, it was Rick that has the idea of getting people out of his house by smearing walker guts all over them, and the son's not coping very well and he just fucking freezes up and panics, and you turn the page and he's having his face and neck chewed out by walkers, and the next thing that happens, it's the mum who almost gets Carl killed because he's holding on to his hand, and Rick retaliates by chopping off her wrist, and she gets taken back into the walker swarm that's chewing her up, which is really horrific stuff, honestly. And Douglas makes a final stand because he almost kills himself, but he can't quite manage to do it. He then goes out into the crowd and shoots everything that he can, but it's obviously drawing too much noise. But in this wild shootout, he accidentally shoots Carl, and it's done in such a dramatic sense. It's this doubles page, and Carl has half his face fucking blown, it's part of his eye is gone, part of his face is gone now. And it's this double page of him just saying, "Dad," very weakly. It's holy fucking shit, I did not expect any of this to be happening right now. And obviously Rick takes Carl away to their doctors to do their very best to heal him up. It's going to make a lot of noise, a lot of attention, but Rick is very desperate to save all that he has left now. He then goes back into the thick of it. Michonne comes and help him out. Abraham comes to help out. The two gay people come and help him out. Glenn and Andrea come out last minute to help people out as well. And there's just these panels bit by bit of them all fighting off this swarm of walkers. And this is the bit that was getting me really emotional, because it's the community, like our survivors coming together, our heroes coming together, working each other, all having the same mindset. I can't leave them, I can't let them die, I must go and help them. Probably going to regret this later, but we've got to do what we can. And Abraham drags Gabriel out as well, the priest, and he fucking becomes a bit of a hero. He lets people into the church where previously he had gone and fucked up with his own church. And everybody's just having these bits of like character development. Even Eugene, who at first runs off to the church direction, and Abraham tries to get him to say that, no, I'm not giving up this time, I'm going to be helping out. And it's such a beautiful moment that the community, these survivors and community, and I keep correcting myself, but it is a community. The community of people and friends and their family, essentially, all coming together. And they fight off this huge swarm of walkers within the stones of this community, and they manage to do it with no further casualties. It's fucking badass, it's fucking heroic, and as I said, it's really emotional stuff. Even though there's a lot of action going on, so much death and violence, they're all able to uphold their humanity and put others before themselves, because all of them could just fuck off out of the way because there's a suicide mission trying to save people. But they don't. They want to help out. They want to protect the ones they love, the ones that they care about, the friends that they've made. It's fucking wonderful stuff. Yeah, it's just, I love it. I think out of everything that I've read so far, that passage there is the highlight of the Walking Dead experience to me. That's what it feels The Walking Dead is trying to be. That it's about people, family, humanity, and overcoming the worst fucking possible scenarios and dramas and all the rest of it, and just being human. It makes us different from the other animals that we are connected to and not so connected to. That, it's just great. It's beautiful stuff. And that's that. Compendium 2 is out of the way, and as I have kept saying all the way through this section of the video, this is all incredibly sad, incredibly tragic, and very emotional. Basically, to sum up the rest of what I just read, Rick and the gang, mainly Rick, is wanting to build some form of community, like a place where kids can run free and people can just thrive, and some semblance of the humanity that they once knew could come back into being. But as they're going through the winter, they are struggling with food and medicine, but they don't seem to be running out of weapons. And then it just so happens that part of a salvage expedition theme, whatever you want to fucking call it, scouting mission, there we go, that's a good phrase, they meet a guy called Paul, otherwise known as Jesus. And I understand that Jesus is a fairly popular or well-liked character in the TV show. He does appear in Season 3 of Telltale's The Walking Dead. And I don't know if, like the voice actor for Glenn, they got the actor for the TV show of Jesus to appear in the Telltale thing. I would have thought they would have done just to be a bit consistent with things. But he seems a cool guy, all things considered. Pretty good as a fighter, able to take up some walkers with his hands bound, because they cross paths with each other. Jesus meets Michonne and Abraham. Jesus insists on there's a big old community that's wanting to help and trade and stuff. And through a bit of trial and error, and Rick being very suspicious about the whole thing, again sort of acting a bit like a villain sort of thing that we had seen with how other groups have treated Rick and the survivors for reasons that we all totally understand and have experienced and talked about already. But they take them to this community that they've built called Hilltop, which is literally on a hilltop. 20 miles on the other side of Washington. The city, that is, rather than the state. And they've got farms, they've got walls, there's a big old thriving community there, and when the group arrives, their leader is shanked by somebody of the team, the only one that comes back, because everybody else has been captured by some guy called Negan, who runs a massive group of survivors known as the Saviors. And we're going to be introducing a bit more to Negan now in the third volume, especially as his big old mug and baseball bat is on the front cover of that. And as I mentioned already, I'm kind of familiar with Negan already, but it seems like this Saviors group is kind of a big fucking deal. or he's rather tiny, or his group is rather tiny, and it's just a very good, intimidating leader. But I think the actual size of the Saviours is actually something that's threatening this other hilltop group, because there's about 200 of them by Jesus's understanding or guesstimations. So I think Negan is definitely to be a force to be reckoned with, especially if he can intimidate this large community to hand over half of their resources all the time. And Jesus is trying to like band communities together just so that they can have a bit more of their own, which is kind of shitty really, but it would have been an easy thing to work together sort of thing and like push back at the Saviours, which I have a feeling is going to be the case further down the line. But besides this bit of stupidity on Rick's part, who's agreed to take out Negan and the Saviours somehow, there's a bit where there's about 3 or 4, I think it's 3 of the original community that Rick's lot have taken over, who are just beginning to feel a bit scared, angry, whatever, and doesn't like the fact that Rick is taken over and how that some people in their community have died because of him. Concurrent theme with many of the different characters in The Walking Dead and anybody associated with Rick at the moment. And he tries to plan a revolt against him, and Rick obviously stops it with nobody harmed. But Rick doesn't kill the guy because he wants people to work together with a big sense of community, even though he does admit to Andrea later on that he could not just stop thinking about killing this guy. I think his name was Nick. I don't really remember, honestly. There's so many characters and faces to remember, and the art style, some of the characters do end up looking a bit similar, like the guy that Rick could have killed but didn't looks very much like Rick. Carl, yes, somehow managed to survive having half his face fucking blown off, not literally, just like literally his eye and his ear, but some of his memories not there, like he couldn't quite remember that his mum was dead, and he remembered a bit later on. Does not remember his younger baby sister at all, and quite frankly I'm surprised that the author remembered them at all, because the baby sister has not been mentioned at all throughout all of this, which is a very interesting nuanced layer of trauma there that is probably not going to be unpacked. And he had a nightmare of killing a young boy, but could tell that the boy did something awful, and that boy of course being Ben. So that's going to be interesting for that conversation to come up, if it will do at all. But other than that, Carl seems to be returning back to his normal self, albeit with a bit of a patchy memory and patchy remains of his face. I'm such an arsehole. But yeah, it's all ramping up and going in this direction where it's not going to be so much focus about the survivors, like moving from one haven to the next, now doing what they can to survive in their little pocket group. Rick is now wanting to form a community and like thinking of the future rather than a day-by-day thing, because they've got something that works now. They may have a good relationship with Jesus's people, providing that Negan and the Saviours can be sorted out. I don't know exactly what's going to go down. I know the scene with Negan is probably going to play out pretty much the same way it will do in the TV show, because I feel that's kind of like a famous thing in like nerd media culture, something that I've mentioned before already. But again, I don't really know. I'm reacting to this as I'm reading things and digesting things, so it's all fairly new, fresh to me, even though I do know bits and pieces here and there. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what's going to happen now, and also how the onslaught of walkers is going to affect things as well, because the walkers have been mentioned less and less as each bit's going on, that it's just as we move from one scene to the next, or it's very clear that they're going outside because Michonne chops their fucking heads off and there's occasional bit of gunfire. It'd be interesting to see if we're going to get another huge herd or horde with the survivors to be dealing with, and if that's going to like intersect with the Saviours and the Hilltop Law and any other community that's going to be like shaking things up a little bit. And I also know that upon completing the Telltale's The Walking Dead collection recently, I know there was a faction known as the Whisperers who dress up or appear to be like the Walkers and then use tactics to direct the flow of the Horde, which is kind of a scary thing to think about. I don't know if they're going to be appearing in the next compendium that I'm going to be reading, or whether it's going to be further down the line. But if it's anything as traumatic and an emotional roller coaster ride as Compendium 2, then I think I'm still going to be really enjoying myself, because, oh boy, things getting really intense now. So yeah, Negan scares the shit out of me in a really fun, charismatic sort of way. Like, this is the pretty much the only engaging villain that we've had so far. Like, the governor was just a lot. But Negan and the rest of his saviors appear to be a very interesting bunch as antagonists. Specifically, somebody else called Dwight, who I'm going to talk a bit about more in a moment. But it does not take long for Rick and everybody else to encounter the saviors. And Rick and his lot being very good at handling with guns and weapons, able to take out a squad here and there. They take out another one, and as the group are heading back to a hilltop to get some more supplies and whatnot, Negan's lot arrives. And with Negan, about 50 strong of them. And Negan does the whole, like, picking off who he's going to kill, and Glenn's dead now, and Abraham died just before all of this as well. He got shot in the head by an arrow, which is really sad, because I was starting to get around to liking Abraham, and Glenn's been around for so long, and his death was just brutal, just beating the fucking shit out of him over the head with a baseball bat, wrapped round in barbed wire called Lucille. And yeah, he has a very good read on everybody. Negan, this is. Like, he kind of picks up the vibes that Nick is kind of this almost addicted to power in a wholesome kind of way. Like, I've talked about before, like, Rick seems to turn when power is taken away from him. Typical cop behaviour, you ask me. He can see that Carl is borderline psychotic, and it's kind of funny that he's not wanting to get rid of Glenn because he doesn't want to be accused as racist, similar with the other people of colour in the group. And because it just takes up half the fucking group, he doesn't know what to do. He does the whole eeny, meeny, miny, mo thing. It just so happens to land on Glenn and has his fucking brain caved in. And Rick has this sort of plan now, sort of, to try and learn more about him and to take things so rather than go on a mass onslaught, because they are led to believe that the Saviors are hundreds of people all armed to the teeth with weapons, which is quite frankly fucking stupid. That anybody could believe that an entire community could be so well armed or that competent in using guns, but he has taken the slow game at the moment, trying to learn what he can. He sends Jesus in, who barely is able to escape. That he gets captured by some of them, who's being led by this guy called Dwight, who's got half his face burned off, and it's that guy there, so he's important to this chapter, the compendium, this part of The Walking Dead, I should say, at the time. So I feel he's going to be a bit more than just an antagonist or side antagonist. He might become like an anti-hero sort of thing, for reasons I will talk about in just a moment. So Dwight gets captured by the group, Rick Slot, and get let go, because Rick's trying to play the cautious thing to make Negan and co believe that they're scared, that they're willing to comply, but Rick is wanting to find out more about them. Which is kind of ruined a bit by the fact that Carl ends up getting captured by them because he jumps in the back of their van, and when the van opens, he like mows them down with Abraham's machine gun. And Negan actually looks after Carl for them. He doesn't harm any hair on his head, or he makes him remove the bandage and exposes his eye, but that's about it. We learn a bit more about Negan and his many wives. He picks up a woman from the community, and they can skip the queue of like their feeding rights and the point system that they have. And we see that Negan punishes one of his wives by attacking the former husband having an affair with somebody else. It's interesting that he can have all these different wives, but it doesn't work both ways, sort of thing. And the way he punishes them, he gets an iron, heats it up on maybe a gold smelter thing, and burns somebody's face off. And that's how we learn how, or it's rather implied, how Dwight became like that. It's immediately confirmed quickly afterwards. That Dwight's wife like tries speaking to him, and like Dwight is very angry and resentful that she gave up their relationship to be with Negan so they could be fed or whatever. I'm sure we're going to learn a bit more about this as time goes on. But it's a very interesting setup because Carl's able to relay this information back to Rick, saying that he's got all these wives, how there aren't that many people with guns there, how their community is basically an old factory. The perimeter's surrounded by the dead, impaled, which kind of reminds me a little bit about what happened with the tail end of Season 1 of Telltale's Walking Dead. I'm sure there was quite a bit of inspiration with the comics and whatnot. I know from some of the developer commentaries that the team were inspired and watching by what was happening in the TV show, which is again inspired by the comics, but it's quite clear from how they set things up and the whole aesthetic that they were very much inspired by the comics. And it's interesting that Negan hasn't harmed Carl here, because he could do, given how brutal he was with Glenn and how psychotic Negan is. Like, when I say that he's charismatic and he's likable, he's completely and utterly a fucking nutter. But Negan is clearly a very damaged individual. He calls the baseball bat Lucille. It's clearly after his wife. He hasn't said this, but it's very clearly like a lover or a wife or a sister. I think it's a lover, because he talks to it like a woman, like someone to be treasured. You know, it's like fucking gold dust. Like, I think it's a wife of some description. He's quite fair to Carl. He hasn't came up with a punishment for mowing down his men yet, but that time will probably come at a later point. I think it's leading towards Rick being killed, but again, I have no fucking clue what's going on with that. And he does seem willing to treat people fairly, provided they obey to his rules, and I know it's like a very typical dictator tyrant sort of thing. But he could have done quite a lot with Carl. He could have left him like a warning mark or something, because he smelted somebody's face away. Like, he can do a lot of really evil shit, but these tries to understand Carl, not from just like understanding the enemy sort of thing, but like kind of getting to know him a little bit more. And he gets really apologetic when he makes Carl cry, which is very interesting. He's not mockingly so, like you can see that he's being genuine, like he felt bad for upsetting him. It's a fascinating ball that we're going to slowly unravel, I think, with Negan. And I'm curious to see what Dwight is going to be doing in part of all of this, because you know, he gets captured, he comes back, and Negan doesn't say much about it, and you can see in a panel he's clearly fucking upset, and angry and bitter and resentful about Negan of all of this. So I feel that Dwight may jump to a different bandwagon of some description, or may retaliate against Negan, or he's going to probably break his wife out somehow, or something, but again, he's on the fucking compendium here, so he's going to be a bit more important than just a thorn in Negan's side, so to speak. I think he's going to have a much bigger role to play. So basically, I'm really looking forward to see what Negan's going to do next. What Rick's plan is exactly, playing the long waiting game. What is everyone going to do? Because also, I have to mention that Rick playing the long game is not being conveyed to the rest of the community. Basically, only him and Andrea know that Rick is wanting to retaliate. Oh, and Jesus to an extent now. But everybody seems to believe that they're just going to play ball. And this may cause some form of retaliation when the group, like, they're fed up of like having half their shit taken away. Like, what are we going to do? We have to do something. So it'll be interesting to see just exactly how all of those different elements just fall into place. And also, I feel I'm really going to enjoy just finding out what the fuck is up with Negan and what he's going to be doing. And as I said, he's a fucking nutter, and he's rather frightening. And just as I'm finishing up, like, reading this bit, I turned to this page here where Jesus goes to Rick. I think it's time to introduce you to Ezekiel. I've got no idea who Ezekiel is, but he sounds pretty badass. But then there's this one page here with Negan that says, "Let the slaughter begin." It's like, oh shit, what's happened now? We've got a time jump. And then I turn the page, and it's literally him playing fucking ping pong, table tennis. In such a short space of time, like, that's basically how much space Negan has been occupying in one form or another now. And it's just that page there, with a very childish, over-the-top, "Let the slaughter begin." My heart jumps to my throat. That is excellent writing and excellent character development. And I almost forgot, which is why I'm putting my phone on the shelf. It's a particularly weird angle here. Eugene is coming out of his shell a bit more now. He's not being so much of a fucking distant scientific weirdo. He reckons that he can mass produce bullets for the group, which I think is going to lean a lot more into their strengths of like fighting back opposition, which is probably going to lead up to some much grander fight later on in this part of the Walking Dead series. He's also trying to get along better with Rosetta, who was the wife partner of Abraham's before Abraham started cheating on another girl called Holly. It shouldn't be confused with this Holly here, this absolute delightful nipple pig. Yes, you are. And it's actually good that he's trying to be a bit more useful and resourceful and not being the cowardly so-and-so that he was in the, well, earlier on in the series, which is all lovely stuff, really. I just wanted to mention that before I totally forgot about it. It just seemed weird to mention it at a later point in this review. Everything you've heard up until this point is the first day that I've cracked open the spine of that book. And I showed you earlier on how much I had read. this is how much that I've read now. And the reason why I'm making this point here is purely because I cannot put this fucking thing down. It is so exciting, it's filled with so much emotion and drama and tension, and it's just, as I said, I just can't put the fucking thing down. Because the basic gist of it is that these communities are now at war. Rick is allied with his community, the one of Hilltop, and the one of Ezekiel, known as the Kingdom, because people have painted this picture of Ezekiel being this bloody hero sort of thing, because he's got this pet tiger called Shiva, who, spoilers, was torn apart by walkers pretty early on in this war, and these three communities are all banding up together to fight Negan's Saviours, which just gives you an idea of just how large the Saviours are, and they're able to get the drop on some of the outposts because Dwight, who I mentioned earlier on, who I thought was going to jump ship, he's fucking pissed off and he wants to save his wife, he wants to have revenge, so I was kind of right in that predicament, and he's doing his best to gain their trust, but they're not quite too sure. Rick isn't quite too sure, Jesus is, I think somebody else is rather trusting of him as well. Maggie, who I've not mentioned all that much throughout this, the now widow of Glenn, which is a weird thing to think about, she's kind of taken over Hilltop because she has had enough of Gregory being a fucking pussy and just rolling on his back and just letting Negan do whatever the fuck he wants. At some point the Saviours invade, or attempt to invade, Rick's community, which I've since found out I believe is called Alexandria. I might be mistaken, but I'm still going to call it Rick's community because I'm not 100% certain. And they invade, and Rick almost dies, and somebody else almost dies, and Holly, the lover interest of Abraham, sort of sacrifices herself to the save, drams a car into their haven factory thing, and they capture her. But when they release her back, she's now a walker and gets Denise killed. Hayes, I think his name is, the other black guy with the glasses and the dreadlocks. I don't remember all the names. There's a lot of characters to remember here. But Negan had the surprise attack of using grenades and launching them into the building, which now forced everybody to move from that space to Hilltop, where it's just a lot safer because of the altitude and the war wasn't just the larger of numbers. And it's really interesting that how commonplace grenades are in a lot of American-focused action sequences, and yet here the weight of their destruction is truly felt, because we have not seen grenades being used at all throughout this series. We see guns, we've seen swords, we've seen all sorts of other improvised weaponry, but not grenades. And this devastation and the destruction is really felt here, that you really feel that a lot of people are going to die now, and there's probably some people, NPCs that don't have any names that are mentioned, that have been killed off, but the ones that we know about is that Hayes, I think his name is, as I said, the guy with the dreadlocks and the glasses, has his leg blown off. Denise is dead, because, bitten by Walker. Jesus makes this heroic move of somebody throws a grenade, he catches it, and he throws it back, and there's a split second when you think that, oh shit, he and a load of other people are gone. But no, it's not, it's people on the other side, and Dwight turns on his people just as another reassurance thing that I am on your side here, people. Later on, Eugene and a few others get captured because they're working on developing guns and whatnot, but Negan finds them, takes them all in, and then Dwight and somebody else just started to rescue them, which is where I've stopped reading for now, because if I carry on reading this now, and then go to sleep, I'm not going to remember everything to waffle to you lot later on. But that's really the basis of everything that I've read so far. There's a lot of action going on here. There's little conversations here and there about the destruction of the war, insecurities, and all the other sort of things we are used to seeing with the Walking Dead, characters admitting things about themselves, characters worried about other things. Carl is still a fucking arsehole, but it's all trauma-based, shutting off from Sophia when he gets back to Hilltop. Sophia's just not wanting much to do with Carl now because they act like kids and he isn't. He wants to help, but she's still in that naive, ignorant state, which you got two opposite ends of the coins here. There isn't a middle ground for the two of them. There isn't a Clementine situation. Just to make another comparison to the Telltale games. But yeah, it's just so tense and just so exciting seeing all of this unfold and learning bits about all the different characters, a bit more about Negan. And Negan has this idea now where they're going to coat all their weapons in the walkers, so when they hit people and kill them, it's going to turn people into walkers. And I'd be curious to see just how well that works, purely because we've seen the group like cover themselves in like walker guts already, and if it's like on skin contact, it doesn't seem to be an issue. But then again, this is different from like being on your skin, on your clothes, and then being in your mouth or wounds or whatever. So it'd be interesting to see how that idea follows up. But I'm guessing as it's something that's being mentioned here, it's something that's going to work to some extent. But what would be the point of bringing it up if it doesn't work, unless it's to illustrate just how fucking bonkers Negan is? But this would be like a very wild, out of nowhere pocket sort of thing. So just have to wait and see and guess, as probably, if I continue reading at this pace, I might as well finish this all up tomorrow. So the war is now over. Negan's lot went to Rick's community haven space thing, which I believe is Alexandria now, but I'm still going to call it that because I'm not 100% certain. And there is almost a truce between them where Rick is trying to convince him that they could be like better working partners, and I think Negan's coming over to the idea, or he's trying to play Rick as a fucking fool, but in the very last moment Rick is able to swipe him with a knife and like leave him in a mortal condition, and then use that as leverage over Negan's people. Right, somebody save him and we'll protect all of you, and that's when Dwight properly makes himself I'm presuming the one in charge of the Saviors. We haven't actually seen what they're up to at the moment, and I'll get on to that whole thing in just a moment. But it works. Rick is able to unite the communities together and takes in Negan as prisoner, which is pretty neat stuff. And I was incorrect, actually, about the whole infection weapon idea, because there's a couple of people who turn and their fever's burning up, and Jesus is able to work out what's going on because he finds like a weapon that's been stained. But it doesn't work on Rick because he gets shot in the side or in the leg, I can't quite remember, with an arrow, or bolt, sorry, because Dwight fires with a crossbow. But he doesn't infect it, it's just a clean bolt. So he's very clearly on their side. So he's gotten the revenge that he wanted now. Dwight, I mean, and presumably he got his wife back. And then after that bit has happened and Rick takes him as prisoner, we get a huge time jump. And I'm not talking about like a week or months, I'm talking years. Like, this community has got horses, it's got farms. Rick's people and the other communities are basically acting as fucking cowboys, herding and manoeuvring the dead away from their travel routes. A new group of survivors come in, and it's through this angle that we see a lot of this happening. And we go to Rick, who finally has got a fucking prosthetic for his missing arm, like these little hook things that move about as he moves his shoulder about, which is really fucking neat. They've got bakeries, they've got schools, they've got blacksmith, although we did see a bit of the blacksmith on Hilltop in the section that we've just been reading. But there's a thriving community, there's animals, there's bread, there's eggs. Like, Carl's a bit more grown up, who's just move into Hilltop because he wants to be a blacksmith. Negan is still a prisoner, very much alive. He tries to trick Carl and the other lot to like set him free or kill him, depending on which one he's referring to. You can probably work out which one is which. But things seem to be going fairly fucking well for these lot. And as I said, many years have passed now, and everybody is not just surviving, but thriving. And Rick is sort of like held up as this sort of messiah-like figure who like single-handedly took down Negan, which he kind of did, but he also didn't as well. So it's really interesting just to have that huge time jump, because you could easily drag this story out and talk about how they're building a community and this and that. But it almost feels like a different fucking story at this point, just how well people seem to be getting on, how well everybody's working together, how the original survivors are going on to do this, that and the other. Everybody looks a little bit different except for Andrew, who still looks pretty much the same. She's still very much with Rick, so obviously their relationship is going pretty fucking strongly. And I really hope that nothing bad happens to Andrew soon, because she's ending up to be my favourite character now. We don't know what's happened to Michonne yet, because she's supposedly fucked off and done something, and I'm only presuming that because she hasn't been mentioned yet, and I think that she will. But then again, the Telltale Walking Dead video game with Michonne, titled Michonne, takes place after a certain period in the comics where she does fuck off and does her own thing. So I think it might be that period, I'm not entirely too sure. Or she may just appear at a dramatically appropriate moment. But Michonne is not in the action at the moment. Eugene is able to get a load of old tech working and rebuild it, and he just puts it down to just reading books. But he's a very intelligent guy, and he is really pulling his own weight. He's out there in the action. He's out rounding up and like moving these massive herds of zombies out of the way, and he's doing really fucking well. And I actually really like him. I'm very glad that I was wrong about him being a psycho nutter. That he has this bit of a redemption arc going on. He is wanting to prove himself. And he was able to come back at one point with the survivors and take people out and like organise people. Like he's actually coming into his own light a lot more. So it's really nice that we have somebody who started out being a bit iffy is actually proving themselves. It's really cool. And I'm just really curious to see how all of this is going to unfold now, because we've got this massive time jump. Negan is still alive. You've got some other things that are bubbling beneath. Like there was something up with Eugene that Rick doesn't want him to go outside for, and like it's sort of hinted that Eugene is on his way out or something of that nature. I'm not really too sure. I want to see what Sophia's like around Carl again. I want to see how Maggie is like. There are so many questions now that have now been presented with this massive time jump, and it just makes you wonder just what exactly they're going to do with the dead, the travelling routes, and Rick is still being the fair leader that he is, and also what other threats are going to get in the way. And Rick is also sort of out of the action a little bit because he takes Carl off the hilltop where he wants to live and work now. And then they have to stop for a little bit and deal with these walkers, and he bollocks one of his like, I don't know, I'm going to call them cowboys. They're not quite cowboys, but the one that's keeping the trading routes clear, and he loses his shit. Like, we need these clear. People are not going to be safe. Blah blah blah. And he bollocks people, and it's going to be reported to those in the kingdom. But it's just really awesome to see how all of this is working. Like, this could be its entire story. It doesn't need to be attached to The Walking Dead. But I'm also curious because there's several points throughout The Walking Dead so far. You've seen different characters note just how The Walking Dead are degrading, how that over time they do like get weaker, that aren't able to operate as much, like the literal Walking Dead, degrading and not really operating as they should. So it's curious to see just how that's going to play into this future time. I mean, is there going to be a point where the walkers are going to thin out a little bit? Like, they're going to become something else entirely? I don't think they will. I don't think this series is going to like make them like variants of walkers, but we'll see. I'm just really keen to see what's going to happen next. So The Walking Dead Compendium 3 is now done. I did not expect that I'd be reading this as quickly as I did, but I wasn't really expecting it to be as fun, as engaging as this either. Which, not to say that it's bad or anything, it's just, wow, what an emotional roller coaster that is, for all the right fun reasons. The last bit I want to share with you is that Negan fucks with Rick a bit more because Olivia doesn't lock his cage door when they let him out just to have a bath and do his business, and he gets his hair cut again because his hair grew out a little bit, but it's all cut short again, which to me thinks that he's going to be thrown back into the plot a little bit, and it's just going to be easier to animate him with his short hair, or draw him rather, although animate does apply here as well. I'm getting off topic, but the door is left wide open and he's just there fucking with Rick, feeling that you can trust him, and it's because of keeping Negan alive that Rick has been able to build up this happy little community in Utopia. And he mocks him as like, I'm the best fucking thing that's happened to you, Rick, which is so fucking good writing. It's so funny and it's engaging, and he starts swearing again because Rick pulls up the fact that Negan doesn't really swear anymore because he's sort of lost the the fight, the energy to carry on, much like the bag for the selfie stick that I'm using to hold my phone on at the moment. Obviously, I'm not buying Negan's story one little bit, but it could be genuine. Who fucking knows? I mean, he's going to do anything at the moment to try and get out, but it's just so much fun. Even after all these years, he's still got the same wit and the drive just to really fuck with Rick. It's just a real fun little back and forth as well. And Rick's a bit scared as well, he's all peg leg, he's pointing a gun at him. Like, we all know he's not going to kill Negan. He's trying to set up this greater example. However, one of these communities does actually kill someone, and it's Maggie, which I think is a very interesting person to make that decision, because remember, she's the one in charge of Hilltop, and Gregory, who was the former leader, was a bit of a pushover and just let Negan just do absolutely anything and everything he asked, and Maggie sort of took over, sort of rubbing off of Rick a little bit. And there's an incident within Hilltop where when Carl arrives and there's some guys that are picking on Sophia, who's a bit more hardened up now, which I think is a bit bizarre, given how innocent and naive she was acting, but it's good that in those years she actually has a bit of fucking character development. And there's a boys trying to get their way with her, if you see what I mean. And Carl goes on the offensive and then he kills them, like he hits them and he smacks them over the head with a fucking shovel. He's locked away a little bit, and then we're introduced to the Whisperers at last. And yeah, they're fucking terrifying, just the fact that they're able to integrate themselves with the Walkers and have fucking thousands of them under their dominion. And during an attack that they make, or some of them make, on Jesus and some the cowboys, as I'm going to be calling them, he captures one. It's a 16-year-old girl called Lydia, who describes their process of being like going back to more animalistic ways. Like they don't even adopt names. Like Lydia's mother, who is their leader, is called Alpha. Like that's the sort of level that we're working with here. So Jesus captures Lydia, the daughter of the big cheese of the Whisperers, which is kind of frightening to think about. But she's in the room next to Carl, who's been arrested because of what he's done, as Maggie tries to work out what's going on. The two of them talk at each other, and Carl immediately falls head over heels with Lydia. She's not so much innocent, but like she's scared, she's frightened, like she doesn't want a part of any of this. They let her out, and he's got to keep an eye on her. They have sex. It's his first time. She's really into him because of the whole wound feeling his kindness. There's like a whole page panel of her like licking the eye wound, which is real fucking messed up kinky shit. I think she'll do well within the World of Darkness community. Anyway, I digress. Going back to Maggie, with all this violence that happens with Carl and these kids, some parents and whatnot are pissed off by her actions, and Gregory just swoops in. Well, why don't we kill her? And he attempts to poison her badly, because not only does she survive that, but she does this within earshot of fucking Jesus, and he ends up being arrested. But they hang Gregory. They make an example that we can't be doing this sort of thing. But, I think that's been broken. I think there's going to be more killing in Hilltop now. But it's interesting that it's Maggie that's the one that makes the decision, not Jesus. I mean, he has this idea, but Maggie's the one in charge, and she is actually the one that does it, and makes a huge song and dance over it as well, and hasn't told Rick about it yet. That would be very interesting. No, what Rick's more focused on at the moment is the fact that Carl has run off with the Whispers, because the Whispers came to the group. They wanted an exchange for their prisoners for the daughter. Carl wasn't too happy about that, so Carl has gone running off after her, because as this whole shit with Negan wasn't bad enough. We learn a bit more about the Ezekiel-Michonne relationship a bit more. Michonne is like doing absolutely everything she can not to be fucking happy, just sabotaging everything, which we've seen already, but she actually admits this to Rick at long last, because she comes in on a pirate ship sort of thing, not like a pirate, like a ship, and she's all dressed up like a fucking pirate. And we learn more about her family and her daughters, which I think is interesting, because as I'm recording this, I've just unboxed the starter set, which you'll find in a playlist, the Missions Unboxed playlist to go and watch, hopefully. And the pre-generated character sheet for the official Walking Dead TTRPG says that she had a son rather than daughters, and I think that's a weird thing to change. I don't have any experience with the TV show, remember. And so she tags along with Rick, and she was hoping to get back together with Ezekiel, who she clearly loves and he clearly loves, but that's okay now, because the whole fucking... Well, he's dead. Alpha had integrated with the community at Hilltop and has actually killed a load of people. It was like a warning to Rick to fuck off, and she sends the daughter back as like a warning, like, you're not worthy of us, you're too emotional. But she also does this from the angle like she can't give the daughter the life that she wants. But yeah, the weird duality here. I'm not feeling that emotional connection with the mother just yet. So yeah, I think we're just about to have another fucking war between these communities and the Whisperers. Oh, and with the Saviours, Dwight doesn't want to be a leader, he doesn't think he has the chops for it, but Rick reminds that they listen to you. Like, you stepped in not because you wanted to, because it just needed to be done. People respect and listen to you. So the Saviours, the Alexandria community, Hilltop and Ezekiel's kingdom, which have moved from the main city. No, they had not moved from the city, because they were just at the port just to collect Michonne again. I imagine all these are going to go to fucking war with the Saviours in some capacity, with the Whisperers in some capacity. particularly the fact that a load of important people from Rick's community have been killed, and Ezekiel is being killed. But how they're going to do that with people that dress up as fucking walkers, I have no fucking idea. I, again, have a feeling that Negan is going to play a part in this somehow, because he has a fucking haircut now. Why, all this time, he's demanded a haircut, I have no idea, but I think it's because he's going to be in a few more scenes now in the comics, and I would not be surprised if Rick would throw him to the fucking Whisperers as like a bait sort of thing, like he's the only one twisted enough to do anything about it. I don't know, I'm just making possibly wild guesses, but some of my wild guesses so far have been like eerily accurate, so hopefully I'm correct with that, because I'd love to see a bit more Negan in the action. But we're on the final fucking compendium here, ladles and jelly spoons. Like, this is one wild fucking journey, and I'm almost sad that it's nearly over.
So after some tense conversations, a bit of a fight breaking out in their little meeting hall, Rick has gathered a militia of some description, training people up so they can take the fight to the Whisperers eventually, but not until he gets nearly killed a couple of times, and he has a conversation with Negan of all people how best to handle the situation, which I think is very interesting. There's a strange respect and admiration for the two of them that neither would ever want to admit, but with Negan appreciating Rick a lot more than the other way around, I think, which is a very interesting thing indeed. And it's within those murder attempts that Rick kills somebody in self-defense, and the son of that person who was killed isn't too happy about that, and he's only gone ahead and released Negan and led him straight to the Whisperers, where I presume the idea is to inform the Whisperers that Rick's people is wishing to mount an attack, which isn't fantastic by any means, but I'm not really convinced that Negan's going to follow through with it exactly. I feel that he's going to try and help Rick out some way, somehow, or he's just going to kill the guy and try and take back the Saviours. This is a very interesting situation that this Brandon guy has not thought through very well at all. Now, on the topic of Rick's people, Carl and Lydia have been hidden away to stop the residents of Alexandria wanting to kill them, just out of anger, just because they know that Lydia is the daughter of Alpha, who killed 12 of their own people there, linked communities. And Michonne had the idea to have Carl replace Dwight as the leaders of the Saviours, which hasn't happened yet. Maggie, of course, is still in charge of Hilltop, and she told Rick about what happened with Gregory, and there was a bit of a scuffle about it, but that's all sorted now. There's no bad blood between them now, which is nice to hear, because I was a little concerned that was going to clap back at them rather hard, but I'm glad that there was some sort of consequence to their actions then. There was some tension there that has now been resolved, which is nice, I suppose. Rick has suggested that Michonne should take over Ezekiel's people, which would be a very interesting power move for sure. And that's kind of really it we are so far on. Dwight's moved in with Rick and his lot. He's sort of leading the militia. He doesn't want to be a leader. He's got Negan's back as well, which I think is a very interesting thing. Yeah, that's just kind of really where I've got to the moment. There's obviously conversational pieces here and there. Oh, forgot, Eugene. Eugene has got a radio working, and he's currently in cahoots with some people. Now, there was a woman on the front cover of the Compendium 4th, and it might be relating to her, because if she's on the front cover, then they're important in some capacity. And I was right about Dwight stepping into the spotlight a bit more. It just happened a bit later than what I thought it would do, admittedly. Actually, no, I take that back. It happened a bit shorter than I thought it would do. I don't know. I was surprised about how quickly he turned around. I don't know whether it was late or short, but I was surprised all the same. So it'll be very interesting to see what Negan's going to do with the Whisperers, what he's going to do with his Brandon kid. I think he's just going to kill him the first chance he gets, honestly, just to tie up loose ends sort of thing. And whether Negan would just use this as opportunity to say, hey, you can trust me. I don't know what Negan's game is, and I'm just really want to find out what the fuck's going on there. And I want to see just how exactly the community are going to deal with the Whisperers, because there's a fucking frightening idea that you blend in with the Walkers and you've got really no idea how large your enemy is. But Rick knows just how fucking huge the herd that they control at the moment are just locked away somewhere. Thousands of the fucks. Yeah, it's just really fascinating shit. And it'll be interesting to see what Carl thinks about stepping up and becoming the leader of the Saviours, because despite his age, Rick is constantly treating him like a child, and at this point it's just getting a bit frustrating and boring. Like, let fucking Carl break out his shell a bit more, he can handle himself. Sure, it's a bit fucking lucky, I suppose, but I think he would be a really interesting leader, honestly, although I feel there is the tendency to him be on the bit of the bloodthirsty side of things. Sort of the weird middle point between Carl and Negan, now that I think about it. Which is really frightening to think about. I fucking called it. See that? That is the head of Alpha in Negan's hands, with the caption, "Wait until Rick gets a look at you." He winningly went to the Whisperers, became a member of them for a few days, learnt a bit about them, got her away in her most weakest and emotional state, and beheaded her. That's some fucking Batman Joker shit going on there. And it was so well executed. Pardon the pun. Wowzers. So a lot of War Whisperer shit happening. Dwight was able to organise everybody in his little segment with Rick's lot to fight back the Whisperers in the den. They actually dressed up as them to infiltrate their numbers, turned their trick against them, which did pretty well. Negan actually did a fair amount of fighting as well. He had to claim a gun from someone who died, and then got his baseball bat from Dwight. And for a noble sacrifice, Lucille was able to do a bit of damage towards Beta, who we've been introduced to now, the right hand to Alpha, who was this tall fucking giant of a person, even much taller than Negan was. And Negan, I thought, was about like 6'5", so I'm guessing Beta was about like 7 foot something. And Negan was obviously very upset with the death of Lucille, because there was some symbolism behind that and what the bat represented. It was actually quite sad, honestly. Negan going through all these different emotions, and because of who and what he is, no one was all that really prepared to listen to him talk about like how upset, you know, this death was, all the while this is happening, while somebody who got bit had their hand chopped off. Hilltop was also invaded, the Whisperers had flaming arrows, and that's been completely flattened. Carl saved a load of people, and I think Lydia and Carl back together, because there was a little thing where she tried to break up from him, but they're sort of back together again now. She feels really bad because she never saw like the other perspective of what they were doing. She felt bad, but she held her own in the combat, fired a lot of gun and sword and whatnot, which she would have been trained to do with the Whisperers. So I'm glad that she was able to actually fight against those that braced her, which must have been very difficult for her, but I don't think we're going to get much more of an explanation of her family side of things. Her family being not just mother, for which she knows is dead now, but also, you know, the people that she's grown up with and used to, because that must have been very fucking difficult as well. We also have a couple of issues potentially brewing with the other two sanctuaries, the Saviours and the Kingdom. I'll start with the Kingdom because that's the one that's easiest to talk about at the moment. I think a guy called William is leading them at the moment. He keeps having his leadership challenged because there's some other guy who thinks, well, Rick keeps sending our people in to die, and William like threatens him, like put a knife against his throat, like leaning back on a chair, sort of in a really cool dramatic way, like, I could kill you right now, but I believe in Rick. Rick is doing this for all of us, etc. and so forth, which is great. And there was a similar conversation with people at the Saviours, but someone who is kind of calling the shots now is wanting to take over when the war with the Whisperers is over, which is a shame. It's a bit of a shitty thing. Hopefully they can have a bit of a turnaround, and once that happens, like, they believe that Rick will do his absolute best to fight against the Whisperers, but when the dust settles, that's when they're going to try and take over, which is really unfortunate and sad, because their allegiance is more with Dwight, with Rick, and even though Rick is allied with Rick, it's a frustrating thing, but I kind of expected someone someplace somehow to turn against Rick and his lot. Just wasn't quite expecting the way that it played out. However, the war is not over yet, because we now see the full ocean of Horde, you know, the thousands upon thousands that the Whispers have collected and like kept stored away. Beta has sent them all en route to Rick's little haven community place. And I don't think that's going to last very long. Now I think they're all going to pack up ship and leave. There's not going to be a happy ending with this one. I mean, yeah, there's a significant portion of the final compendium for me to read, but I would not be surprised if there's a shitload of casualties here,
And if Rick was going to die in the book, I think it would be at this bit here. That would be a pretty noble martyrdom sort of way to go, but who fucking knows? This might present an interesting way for Negan to go in with the kill sort of thing, and I had that big old betrayal sort of thing, but he seems to be like doing his best at earning Rick's trust. But he's a real sneaky, snidey little shit, so I would not be surprised that in the chaos he would use this to get one over Rick and like lead people through fear, but we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens. So by some sheer dumb luck, Rick and the gang managed to fight off against all those thousands of walkers, those that didn't come into the settlement themselves, that were all just basically shanked to death. There was a really haunting picture of just all of them surrounding this big old house where Rick was staying. That made me think, God, this is the end, even though I had like more than half the fucking book to go. And it was Negan that saved him. They had a bit of a weird heart-to-heart, feeling bad about living while so many of them died around each other. And I kind of feel that Negan was definitely trying to show that he can be trusted, and when the Saviours arrived, led by Dwight's wife, former wife I should say, who turned against Dwight, it was him, Negan, that managed to convince everybody else to fuck off and to return things back to normal, which is such a strange turn of events, and I'm kind of glad that that all happened, really, because there's a bit of character development growth there. Like, I think it would have been a bit boring if he was like trying to take over again and like go against Rick again, but he's trying to be different, or at least that's how it's coming across to me, unless he's got some other plan going on. But he'd had so many chances to betray Rick and kill him and all the rest of it, but he was made to like pack up some fiends and fuck off. And Dwight isn't too happy about that. Maggie isn't too happy about that. Maggie's currently having somebody stalk Negan to see what he's doing, what his plans are. And Dwight isn't too happy because his former wife, Sherry, is dead, because she tried to kill Rick during a conversation, and they had a bit of a scuffle, and she tripped and hit her head. So I think Dwight's going to do something fucking stupid now and go against Rick or something, which is a shame because I kind of like Dwight. But one thing that was particularly upsetting, which I think the author Robert Kirkman knew was going to be really upsetting, is that Andrew's dead. Like, they're trying to, those that aren't in the city walls are trying to herd up and push all these walkers into the sea off the coast sort of thing, because I forget that Washington is like a fairly high up sort of coastal thing. Anyway, in an attempt to save Eugene, who through no fault of his own like fell off his horse like trying to save everyone, she rescued him and was scratched or bitten on the neck, and they really dragged out her dying, like everyone who knew her like giving their condolences. And this really agonising bit with like Rick with her, he couldn't force himself to kill her, which he'd managed to do with everybody else that he liked and he loved, but he couldn't like put a bullet in her head. Like, he was just so overwhelmed, and of course she came back as a walker and there was a bit of a fight, and so he was forced to stab her in the head. It was so gut-wrenching, I nearly cried. Like, Andrew was my favourite character for one thing, but just seeing just how deeply he loved her, that this wasn't just like a rebound thing. Sure, there was the year jump, but I was a bit unsure about how well that relationship would work, and it worked really fucking well. And it's sad that she's gone, and she's a fucking good sharpshooter as well, and it's really fucked Rick up, just sleeping out by her grave now, but he still has to lead. And, you know, he sort of collapsed in his son's arms after they left the house, all of his friends and whatnot around him, and they all put their arms on each other's shoulders, like Carl was touching them, like doing their best to pay respect and the appreciation and their love, and laughing at Holly snoring, which is nice. It's a really sad bit, but it's nice that they gave her the respect that was due. Like it didn't feel that her death was cheap, honestly. And where I am now in the tale is that part of the group is now off to Ohio, because through Eugene they found out the people on this radio where they're based, and they're going to go and meet with this contact in Ohio and see what it's like, because Ohio is quite a trek away. I think it's Jesus that says it's weeks away. He doesn't go with them because he wants to stay behind and be with a guy called Aaron, who he has feelings for, because Jesus is gay apparently, which is awesome. Gay or bi, I'm not too sure, but I think it's gay. He's got gay best friend vibes for me personally. And it's just as this group is fucking off, Sadiq and Eugene are with each other, and Sadiq admits to Eugene that Rosetta was in love with him, and it was confirming that the baby that she had was not Eugene's but his. And this is particularly sad because Rosita was one of the ones that Alpha had killed off earlier on, and we haven't seen the Whisperers since then because they just fucked off and just let the dead have at him. But I don't think that they'll return now at this point of the series. That just seems like it's the end of the Whisperers arc. If they do come back, it'll be an interesting surprise, I guess. But yeah, it's lots of emotions here, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen with Negan again. Because Maggie really wants him dead because she hasn't loved anybody since Glenn died, and of course Negan killed Glenn quite horrifically. Want to see what Eugene's going to do in the relation to news. Like, he remembers Rosita saying that, oh, I didn't love him, it was an accident, it was a stupid thing. But he's keeping around because, you know, he still wanted to try and make the relationship work. It never quite did, unfortunately, which is a shame because I want the man to have a happy life now, despite me thinking he was like real sketchy to begin with. He's really coming to his own stride, like the community being able to use electricity and heating and like having all these plans for everything. It's because of him. Like, he's been the mastermind behind all of this. Like, he's really become a core part of the series, and I think that's pretty fucking awesome, honestly. And I want to see what this group in Ohio is like, and just, well, what's next, because it just feels like it's just picking up the pieces and just got somewhat half of the book left to do, and it's and getting emotional because it's all being wrapped up soon, and I don't really want it to end. Once again, I find myself not being able to put a large chunky book down. If I could get this all done in one day, that would be absolutely bonkers, because I can't recall the last time I've read a fucking huge book like that in a single day. Going back to like fucking early teen years at school, but I'm sort of getting a bit off topic here. A lot what I have read up until this point has mainly been doing with a small group of people moving to the location in Ohio that I mentioned earlier on. There was a little bit with Jesus and Aaron moving to Hilltop, I think it was, so they can have their like happy new life together, but they get ambushed by Beta and a few of the Whisperers. I don't know why I keep forgetting their name in these videos. The Whisperers, and they're able to take out Beta and the others pretty fucking quickly. And they take off his mask and they recognise him. And I make this point because Beta makes this thing like he's got no name. Beta is he's very dedicated to the Whisperer course to a T. And Jesus and Aaron like joke about, oh, he was a baseball player. And I think it's kind of alluded that he did pretty badly, or something happened, or he wasn't great, or something like that. He just... That's probably why he's hiding things so well. Would also explain his athleticism about why he's so fast. Although I would have expected more of a basketball player because just how tall he is. It might have even been that, but anyway, he was a sports player, and obviously something went south somehow. You know, apocalypse aside, that is. But it's kind of funny just how offhand they sort of deal with that. You think it's going to be like a really serious moment. Jesus is looking over Aaron and thinking, you know, this is the one, this is going to be the life that I have, and then you see that shot with a Beta towering over Jesus, but Jesus being like the expert fighter that he is. And so is Aaron to an extent, but Jesus is like a whole fucking new level, doing like fucking action backward flips and sort of things. They're able to get rid of him, and they find like remains of the Whisperers. They kill some, and then they take some with them as like tag along sort of thing, like to this new, I think it's Hilltop, I can't quite remember what it is that they're going, but the point is, they're no longer the Whisperers, and that is now properly done. We also see the Negan story get wrapped up as well. He goes back to where Lucille, the baseball bat, was buried, and he's doing his best to live a life peacefully. Maggie finds him and goes to shoot him, and like he's egging her on to kill him. Not like in a bad way or anything, like to like call a bluff or anything, like, because it's quite clear now that he genuinely sees the errors of his ways, that he tried to do what he survived, which kind of like the inverse side of Rick, really, what Rick could have been, you know, if he was a bit more of a dick. How that rhymes with Rick. How uncanny that. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. You know, and he's like, it's what he deserves, like, enemies and, you know, stuff like that. And it's kind of sad, really, that he's truly fucked himself over here, but Maggie doesn't kill him. Despite all the anger that she feels and all the things that she promised, she wasn't going to kill him, and she just said, no, you have to survive this, you know, you have to remember what you've done. and then he moves on. I think he sets fire to the house that he was staying in, or the grave or something, and he finds another baseball bat with barbed wire or something. But he leaves all that behind him and he moves on, which is the end of one chapter. So that Negan story is finished now. I know there's like a prequel Walking Dead comic series or vignette or whatever it is. I know it's quite a small thing called Here's Negan. That's like what happened to Negan from the beginning of the apocalypse to where he comes in with the Walking Dead. Which I may consider reading if it's a cheap enough price, but I would love to see a bit more Negan in my life, so I think that's something that will be happening soon. Whether it will become a review like this, I've got no idea. I suspect if it would be anything, it would be a much shorter of a review, rather than the nearly 3 hours that this video has now become. But it's nice that we have a satisfying ending for Negan. It makes sense that Maggie wasn't going to kill him because it's truly pathetic that he doesn't deserve to be killed off because that's what he wants. That he can just like live for the rest of his days and suffer and have that guilt weighing him down. I'm glad that Maggie didn't do that, so she doesn't become, in a way, like Negan, just killing people off left, right and centre because she doesn't want to. Because she wants to, rather, and, Negan claiming that he only killed people because he wants to, and I kind of believe that, really, but he's sort of very much an abusive individual, and he took control of people, and he was an arsehole with it, and he could just get away with it, and I think there's that fine line between doing what needs to be done and being a fucking arsehole, and I think that Negan crossed that line at more than one point, but it's cool that you've got a character like that has a bit of a redemption arc, that does want to make a difference, that wants to be fair, and even with all of that, he fucking hated people that tried to rape people, which made a huge bit of conflict between him and the Whisperers, which just goes to show that with like rapists and pedos in the Walking Dead universe, those are the true scumbags and monsters. Like, that is the line that we draw with morality. It's like everything else is A-OK to an extent. You know what I'm trying to say. I talked about that with disability and representation earlier on in this video, which I also published as its separate own vignette because I thought it was just too good not to include in its own little video. But I'm avoiding like the main group that's going to Ohio to find Stephanie. And as they go through Pittsburgh, that's completely and utterly barren except for like a few walkers and one person, which is that woman there with the spear. I've forgotten her actual name because they're so used to calling her Princess now because that's just the nickname that she prefers. I'm describing her like a more upbeat 80s anime sort of infused Michonne because she's really good in combat. She's a woman of colour, has an unusual weapon, a spear. It's not one that's been like made out of wood and a bit of stone. Like, I don't know how well that's going to appear, but this is something that someone like you could buy online sort of thing. But she holds herself in combat a little bit and she tags along with the group, and then they get to this location which is the meet-up point with them and Stephanie, which is around this train station, and then they get taken in by a guy called Lance and some guys who are basically dressed up as fucking stormtroopers, and they go to the Commonwealth, which is basically society as it once were, with like shops and stadiums with football games and music concerts, so there's electricity running through the place. The upper class rule, what you had in real life is what you had in the former life you have here, and I don't like it, obviously. I think you would know if you know anything about me, and I'm not going to lie, whilst this is definitely brewing up into like a big old bit of friction between Rick and the woman in charge called Governor Pamela. We all knew what happened the last time the group met somebody called the Governor, who's got like a fucking safari hat going on, which is like, with a really snobbish son who think it's okay to sexually harass women in the group in broad fucking daylight. I don't like this bit, purely because it's less than, because that's not what I've been expecting of this. I wasn't quite expecting to find such a huge group of people that are surviving. It kind of just already puts The Walking Dead in The Walking Dead and a further backline sort of thing, and they're very inexperienced. They don't, I don't know, it's weakened the experience for me, I'm not going to lie. Even with Michonne finding one of her two daughters here, like one of them died pretty early on in the apocalypse, but the other one actually managed to find their way here, and it's really nice to see that Michonne has that reunion with her daughter. I just feel that something's going to go really bad, and like a society like this where you have this woman that's basically capitalism is a good thing, the upper class should rule, and then you have Rick with his situation where he lives in the same sort of house as everyone, he works the same things everybody does.
I don't know. It just I've gone through so many different comics now and so many different chapters and writings and things where we've had these interesting dynamics of humans, and I think it only made sense that they were going to introduce somebody that had a lot more going on, like electricity, water, and like thing that was kind of akin to like a proper ye old west, but the electricity of our times, or at least the times of 2003 or 2000. It wouldn't even be 2003 now because we had that huge time jump. Oh golly, what would that be? Like 2009, 8-ish, something like that. My maths isn't fantastic. Well, 2009 would be 6 years, and I thought it was about 8. I don't know. Like late naughty, so it's not 2010, but it's not too far off there either. Yeah, it kind of makes sense that we would get this sort of like bigger, fancier settlement sort of thing. But I feel it's going to take a massive, huge departure from The Walking Dead now, like the zombies, and there's going to be a sort of different sort of horror that I wasn't quite expecting from this. But I've already made this huge fucking commitment, and I've got so little of it to go now, and if I can get this all finished in one day, that'll be fantastic. But basically, if you see me in a different set of clothes, you know that I failed this for one reason or another. I've just realised I forgot something, and the Stephanie that we got in touch with via Eugene, she wasn't even the important person, she was just somebody who had access to a radio, who was just using it with unauthorised access. Which should have been a bit of a red flag for the group, honestly, when they found out to leave, but they're sort of like getting caught up about staying in this place. Like, one person in the group doesn't think it's a good idea because they've got a fucking straight head, and Michonne obviously wants to stay because her daughter's here, and she's just been given a house. Well, an apartment, a rather large apartment, and a study all connected together because that's what she was in her life and that's what she's going to get. And they weren't going to give anything to Eugene because in his previous life he was a high school teacher. It doesn't matter how intelligent he is now because that's what you were destined to be and that's what you're going to be destined to be now. Like, it's a real fucking shitty system. And I can't, as you kind of gathered from my previous ramblings, I couldn't quite work out, and I still can't quite work out this time, I just don't like it very much. It just kind of just makes it far less interesting as a setting piece. So Rick has arrived now at this new Commonwealth place thing. And already he and the governor woman, Pamela, are already seen, well, they're not really seen eye to eye at all, honestly, because of the capitalism versus communism, essentially. And Rick keeps going to help out, and so does everybody else. Like, they're just used to helping out with everything all the time. But the governor, like, there was a whole, like, clearing out Walker stuff, and she took a shot with a shotgun and then fucked off and let her crew go and sort it out just now. Michonne is a lawyer, and as I said, she's in that big, nice, fancy place, and she had to defend the police who were brutally attacking a civilian, which I think for a woman of colour is a bit fucking dicey area that we're walking on here. Bit of political commentary as well with police brutality. Very political indeed. Dwight is the most outward about not liking how things are, and like he stages like a riot of sort. Well, it's not really a riot. Like he complains and makes a song and dance about the police, and they arrest him just for being loud and causing a disturbance. The people don't like it and they want to change. There is this other cop guy who's basically more muscular, Mr. T, called Mercer, who makes a comment to Rick saying, "This, you're the sort of leader the Commonwealth needs," and now Rick's got it in his fucking head again to take over the Commonwealth. Which I don't think is going to end well. These lots seem really fucking sneaky and shady, and there is something underneath beyond the ignorant trappings of entitled capitalism, I shall say. I keep throwing that word around a bit, but we're sort of repeating history here, and it's not really working, is it? Because you still have a zombie problem, people aren't happy with your police force, like the person who's in charge, their son's a complete dick, and it's not looking very good on the leader person anyway, so I really don't think that it's going to end well for Rick. Like, I feel that he might get fucking assassinated or something just to send out a message or something, which won't end up very well for the Commonwealth people either, but you know, I want to see how this plays out because I've been enjoying the story and I'm so close to finishing now, but White died literally a couple pages after I stopped reading just to do that little bit up in my room. He was very angry, hot-headed, you know, very close to blowing up Pamela's brains because he could just see right through the bullshit. And
For some reason, Rick was following along with her plan, hoping that she was a better person, and he ended up killing Dwight over it, which I feel was such a surprise. I was expecting like one of the police guards or something to do that, or she was going to order to have him executed. But no, he was sort of propped up a little bit like a hero martyr sort of thing. The police situation got out of hand because they arrested Mercer because it was overheard that he was talking about like leading a revolt against Pamela. Mercer was broken out by explosions by some of his own. This caused a bit of a riot kerfuffle in the street, and this sort of got Rick involved once more because he saved Pamela and her city son. They come back, do a big old fight thing. Everybody from all the different communities comes together. When Pamela in return, she thinks that Rick's just trying to take over, and she insists they go to war and fight with each other. Rick puts a stop to it. Then he does another speech, again ending this tyranny, as it were, trying to see things a better and fair way. And he does and I'm calling this the "We are not the Walking Dead" speech, because similar to the "We are the Walking Dead" at the beginning of the comics, it's just presented the same sort of way. It's just he's older, wiser, and far more optimistic than what he was when he was in the prison, thinking that there's not much point to living, that doesn't really matter because you die and you become one of them. Now he's a much more bright, hopeful leader that's wanting to give some peace, a better world, a new world order as he refers it to, which is usually referred to in a more fascist sort of way, I feel, but the old way that Pamela was trying to do wasn't working, and this newer way were basically quite a communist thing, really, of everybody being on an equal footing, everybody putting in their part and their workload. And I feel, and I sound quite withdrawn, I guess, and down, partly because it's like nearly midnight and I'm doing this whilst my family is sleeping above me. But Rick's dead. And unfortunately I was right. It is the shitty son that kills him, because he's just sad and salty that he just came in and just ruined everything that his mum worked for, and now he has to fucking adapt to this newer fair world rather than just being a prissy little shit. He pulls the trigger once with a silence on the gun. You could argue it was an accident. Does it again. And just leaves him. Doesn't get help or anything. And he dies. And what happens just before is that he's having a nice conversation with a much older and experienced Carl. I don't know how much time has passed through this particular segment, but Carl has grown up a lot. He looks a lot older now. He's a late teenager for sure, but he looks like 18-ish now rather than what it was or he looked like at the beginning, at the big time skip that we had when everything was all peaceful and all the communities were working together. And it was Carl that found Rick. Like, he goes into his room and Rick is just like alone as a walker because he was shot in the chest, and Carl puts him out. And as Carl mentions at the end of the section here, is that Andrea and everybody else that he's used to had the chance to say goodbye. Rick didn't. He was on his own. And Carl, his own son, was the one that had to put him down. It's really sad. Everything that Rick went through and everything that he tried to create, the peace and prosperity, all those ideas that he had, came from a fucking cop of all people. Just shot in his bed. An assassination. Not in the field of battle. It's very cowardly. From a very cowardly person, and just everything that Rick's done, all the people he's saved, all the people that he's given a happiness and peace to, is just gone. I dare say it's quite heartbreaking. And I'm on the final stretch of it now, where, as I was just turning the pages, I've seen there's another time jump, and we now see a much older Carl, which I'm going to go and finish reading now and then give my final thoughts on the Compendium before I give a final summarization review of the entire collection. With about 8 minutes to spare, at least as I start recording this, the largest of the 4 Walking Dead compendiums. I finished. Reached the end. I've now read all 193 comics of The Walking Dead, and as I said a moment ago, I'm going to have to sleep on this a little bit and give a proper final thoughts review before I get too emotional about the whole thing so far, but it has been emotional. I'm a bit iffy about its epilogue chapter. There's another time skip, as I mentioned. Carl's all grown up now and he's back with Sophia for some reason. It seems that he and Lydia were really good together. But I get the impression that he sort of felt bad for Sophia not losing her virginity or not having anybody to lose her virginity to, which is something that mentioned earlier on in this compendium. And they have a daughter now called Andrea, named after his mum. There's a common theme with this book that characters name their kids after their fallen parents, which is cringy and sad in equal measures in my taste, but, as I said, each to their own, I suppose. Lydia's still clearly got feelings for him, and the two are still friends, but I'm not quite too sure why they're not an item anymore. It's never explained either, but it's clear that Carl is the one that ended it rather than Lydia. But in this new future, walkers aren't seen as much anymore. There's less of them, probably because of all the work that Rick and his cowboys had set up. And I think cowboys actually works a lot better now, because we are sort of seeing a proper ye old Wild West revival. Eugene in his very old age is getting trains and railways built. Maggie becomes president of the Commonwealth. Her son Herschel is a little shit who rounds up walkers as entertainment, and you can own walkers and have I own them like a slave sort of thing, which is a bit dicey, but it just goes to show just how not so much of a threat the Walking Dead are, and they're referred to as the Walking Dead. As Carl is reading this little storybook to his daughter, as you see a little series of panels, just basically anybody who didn't die previously lived happily ever after, except for the son of Pamela, who's still in prison, and Negan still lives. And there's a moment actually where Carl delivers food to where Negan is living. Probably found that out from Maggie, which is a very interesting thing, because just that one, there's the one encounter at the factory and then all the chats in the prison. Negan very clearly had a big impact on Carl, which I don't think Rick would approve of very much, but it's just fascinating just to see all that happens. And there's a big old statue erected of Rick just doing that pose with his stumpy arm, coat flowing in the wind sort of thing, when he did that "We are not the Walking Dead" speech. I feel a bit mixed about it, because there's the relationship that doesn't make much sense. It would have been nice if that could have been just extended a bit more, but at the same time it was very sweet. I want to be extended a bit more because I just want to find out a bit more what everyone's doing, how they're coping, and I just wanted a bit more of it, really, because I just enjoy reading it so much, and it's just sad and happy that it's all over, really, and just, I don't know, man, I've really enjoyed reading this, and as I said, I should probably stop recording now, think about what I feel about all this before I start crying on fucking camera or something.
So I've had more than 12 hours to think about how this has all made me feel, and to try and sum up my thoughts of the Walking Dead comic series, because I think it's obvious that I really do like it. The characters' emotional, mental, physical journeys, and geographical journeys as well, has been a tremendous joy to read, and it's been filled with lots of sadness, heartbreak, violence, terror, and love and happiness in various different places. It's honestly, as I said, it's just been an absolute joy to read. All the characters, even the ones that I haven't been too sure about and haven't liked, have been so unique and vocal and expressive. They've just been so much fun to get my teeth stuck into. Sure, it hasn't been a perfect writing experience all the way through. There are some very weird spelling and grammatical errors, particularly towards the beginning of the comic book series, as we're transitioning from one art style to the next. The fact that you've got two such different art styles for most of the comics is a bit unusual, and it would have been nice to see what that first art style would have brought. There's that weird bit of sexist writing towards the beginning of the comics run, which just is a bit of a mind scratcher, that one. And with a bit more time to think about things now, I think the characters of Princess and Mercer was sort of introduced too late. Particularly Princess, who was very bubbly and vocal, who provided a much needed joy of happiness and adventure and almost childish glee for our group of survivors, and she was just sort of introduced like right towards the end and didn't really contribute to anything. That feels like she was sort of like meeting some sort of demands from viewers or publishers or something like that. And Mercer being another strongman character whose only real motivation is to overthrow the governor, I feel there could have been a lot more work that there could have been done with him. Herschel and his kids is another one, but I've talked about all of these already. I'm trying to think of the best way that I can summarise my thoughts and opinions on these 4 massive compendiums filled with 193 comics that make up the original Walking Dead series. And I'm not wanting to mince my words, because you know on Lore by Night I try to deliver things as honest and blunt as I can. And this might sound a bit melodramatic to some of you, but I think reading these books and just over the last week and a bit has been a life-changing experience. Which is a bit unusual, again, you know, as I said, might be a bit melodramatic to some. But of course you remember the reason why that I'm coming into this. It's the fact that I am wanting to tackle a nearly 30-year-old phobia caused by a really shitty individual in my life, who's no longer with us, thank fuck. And this foothold is really beginning to loosen quite a bit more now, and I feel that The Walking Dead has been really helpful with that. It's also, honestly, just given me a bit of hope of humanity. Just maybe that if it all goes to shit, we'll be alright in the end. Maybe. And while some of the writing may seem a bit unbelievable, like, well, how can people treat the zombies so flippantly now? Like, they were a real dangerous and serious effect, and people were dying from them, and people are still dying from them. Well, have a look how people are treating COVID, and then come back to me about that. There's a very interesting and unique critical political eye that's been treated through all the way through this, and it's done with care and passion and a lot of respect to a whole sorts of different groups out there. I love the queer rep, I love the disabled representation as well, which always very wholesome and surprising, and it's glad that the author Robert Kerman had decided to follow through with that. You know, the world wouldn't really care too much about that sort of thing. Now, I'm somewhat more pessimistic about that and think there would still be quite a lot of people who would give a shit about that and give a lot of people shit for it, and I'm sure there are people like that within the Walking Dead universe as well. But it's really nice that, you know, he has a variety of gay characters, that there's a lot of focus on characters of different races and backgrounds. It's a very diverse pool. And it's also rather nice that regardless of who and what you are in life, that as long as you think that a rapist and a pedo should fucking die and have their heads beaten in, you're pretty much an alright person within the Walking Dead iteration of a zombie apocalypse. But going back more onto the zombie side of things, it's helped me a lot to confront a load of layers of shit within oneself. As I mentioned in this review, there were bits of it that did give me the little unique sickness that I get from time to time, not as frequent as I once was, partly because of maturity thing and growing up, but also a lot of it's just sort of been tackling it head on with these 4 massive compendiums. And I still can't quite go over that I read that bottom one, which has the most number of pages by a notable amount in a day. Like, as I said earlier on, I could not believe just how quickly and how enthusiastic I was just to getting this wrapped up. It's like being a fucking teenager again. And just for the season as a whole, like, you've probably noticed that with each one that I read, it took less days to read, despite the fact that they have more pages in all of them. Like, I think the first 2 have the same number of pages, although the second one does feel heavier than the first one. It's good shit, and I encourage you all to try and read them somehow, whether you're able to find this massive compendium collection or individually or as a massive lot like I did, or you buy the comics individually. I do believe that fairly recently, and I say fairly recently within the last few years or so, they've been reprinting these comics in colour rather than black and white, which is what I've been used to. So if that's something that you would prefer, go and do that, because I know that it was done in black and white partly for the aesthetic, but also as a costly thing. I believe that's what the reason was anyway. But regardless, I do think it's worth reading and checking out. I don't know how it compares to the TV show. I know there are some wild changes. Having seen the first episode, there are some changes for sure, honestly. But I'm not really interested in the TV show for reasons I've already talked about. But to wrap this video up, I think it would be a really neat idea if we could talk about The Walking Dead in the comments below. What do you think about the comic collection? What do you think about the TV show, the various video games? Good, bad, indifferent? What would you recommend for me to read next? I didn't mention there was that little one about Negan I was wanting to go and check out. And I believe there's a one like based in Barcelona or somewhere else in Spain, but is that worth checking out? Give me your thoughts and opinions in the description below. Now, if you're new to the Lore by Night channel, I usually talk about tabletop role-playing games, and fairly soon I'm going to be putting more Walking Dead content on YouTube. I'm wanting to cover a review of the official Walking Dead role-playing game and starter set. But hopefully, if technology is on my side, I'm going to be recording and uploading a game of the Walking Dead TTRPG with members of the Lore by Night Discord server, and I jest towards there because I'm looking at Discord on the computer there, and hopefully we can have what's known as an actual play on there, so like a let's play with video games, but with running themes for TTRPG enthusiasts. So if I can do that, that'd be absolutely fantastic, but it will be streamed on the Discord server as well, so if you want to check that out as it's happening, you can go and check out the Lore by Night Discord server using the link in the description below. Now whilst you're down there, you can also check out a variety of zombie themed TTRPGs to check out as well. Now if you purchase them with those specific links, I get some of the money back because I'm an affiliate on DriveThruRPG, and that sort of financial support will also help to create content like this, because to buy these four on a bid on eBay was about 84 quid, which is a lot of money, and whilst it's a bit of a bargain for sure, this is the cheapest set I could buy, and getting them individually is a pain in the arse. So that sort of help can provide more interesting content like this, to run TTRPGs for you, and so much more. But what if you've got those books already, or maybe you just don't want to buy them and want to buy some other form of TTRPG paraphernalia? What you can do instead is copy and paste the magical affiliate code in the description below and paste it in the URL of any DriveThruRPG book, whether it's a PDF, a physical book, or some other bit of paraphernalia, and that little bit of coinage comes to your Lore Saviour, which is fantastic stuff really, because you get books, I get books, and you get content for free, which is an amazing win-win chicken dinner situation for you amigos. But if you can't do that, that's absolutely fine. I know times are hard on all of us, and with the state of the world and things, we're sort of having our own little apocalypse, at least in the financial sector of things. With some people it's a literal apocalypse. So I know that shit's going to be really difficult for a lot of you, but if you can't do that, that's absolutely fine. But if you can, that'd be absolutely wizard. But you should definitely do regardless. Give the video a little cheeky thumbs up if you like these sort of reviews or rants or fucking huge videos like this. Subscribe to the Lore by Night channel and share this video with any and everyone who loves what I do. And I'll see you on the next upload, whatever that may well be for you. And until next time, farewell.